Oh, we're good to go. We'll call the meeting to order. Number one, please silence your cell phones. If it rings during the course of a meeting, we ask that you donate $50 to the Wildlife Fund. We don't force it on you, but we'll make you feel bad if you don't. I'd like to do a roll call for the commission. Commissioner Bell. Here. Commissioner Haskell.
Present.
Commissioner Mai. Commissioner Masterson. Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
And I am Commissioner Jolovich. Commissioner Lundball is down with some sinus problems, evidently. Members of public who wish to address the commission on any agenda item, please fill out a comment form located at the registration table and hand it to one of the department staff who will forward it to me. Assisting again today out back there in the back is Hannah Smith from the Laramie region. She's getting kind of we get to see her quite a bit. If you're participating via Zoom, you should have submitted an advance comment form prior to the start of the meeting. If you would still like to comment on an agenda item, please contact the host of the meeting. Excuse me. As we work through the agenda, the public will have the opportunity to address the commission to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak. And as a courtesy to others, please limit your time. Commissioners, if you push the red button, your mic's on. Make sure and turn it on. I will try to remember that myself, Commissioner Bell. Can we all stand now for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Who are we starting with? David? Good morning again.
Red means go. Okay, let me start again. I'm David Wald from the Wyoming Attorney General's office. I'm here to present Chapter 41 to you today. And the reason I'm doing it is because this is a little unusual. We created a problem that we didn't anticipate in January when you all previously approved Chapter 41. So the department made this recommendation, brought you Chapter 41 in January. You voted to approve it, and we had the governor sign it, and we filed it with the Secretary of State. We learned later that because this is a jointly promulgated rule with the Livestock Board, we learned later that the Livestock Board had voted to take the rule out to public comment, but had failed to approve the rule at the time that you approved it. So long story short, the Livestock Board has now met. They met 2 weeks ago. They made a couple of modifications to Chapter 41 with regard to subsection C there with the board approved individual identification definition. They left everything else unchanged though. So procedurally for the Administrative Procedure Act, just the belt and suspenders, we're bringing you back Chapter 41 this morning. You've already received public comment. We can utilize that public comment process to now approve Chapter 41 here today with the Livestock Board's blessing. And going forward, I think this is something that we can solve by adding a signature block for the Livestock Board. And that's something we've discussed previously, and I think it'd be a good idea the next time we do Chapter 41. That way we will know, we won't have to dig through old minutes to determine which agency approved which rule. Back in the day, I think for your bighorn sheep rule that's jointly promulgated, I think we had all three agencies meet at one meeting. I'd like to avoid that with jointly promulgated rules because they're kind of hard to coordinate, but at least adding a signature line next time will let us know, will give us some assurance that it's already been approved by the board. And so with that, the department recommends that you approve chapter 41 as proposed today. And I would encourage you to take any public comments if anyone in the public has any questions or concerns.
No. Mr. President, I would move to incorporate chapter 41 as presented. Second.
Is there any public comment on this, chapter 41? Saying no public comment. We don't have anything, Wayne? Okay, so it's been, the motion's been made and seconded to approve chapter 41 as read. Do we have any comments? Any discussion? There being none, I'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Hey, good morning, President Jolovich, Director Bruce, members of the commission. Dave Zaff, Deputy Chief of Fisheries. I'm not going to be asking for any action on your part today. I'm just going to be giving a brief update on some proposed changes to the Commission Aquatic Invasive Species Regulation, Chapter 62, that are going to be coming before you in July, and some changes that we believe may also be needed to state statutes. And these are the result of some rapid response planning that I'll be talking about, meaning, how the department would respond should we end up with some nasty mussels in one of our waters. I'm going to start with a little bit of background on the AIS program. The first statute regarding AIS was passed in 2010. It gave the commission the authority to stop what's defined as conveyances in statute, includes boats and water hauling trucks and anything that might transport an aquatic invasive species. And it required mandatory inspection of those conveyances that had last been on a positive water before they contacted a Wyoming water. And the legislature required the commission to charge a fee for a sticker that would go on any watercraft that was launched in the state. So it had a decal requirement. In 2011, the statute was revised to allow the commission to recognize AIS programs of other states and their decals as long as their program regulations were at least as restrictive as ours. And at 2012, it was revised again to move inspections to borders and make those inspections mandatory for people entering the state by land. In 2015, we allowed receipts for decals to be electronic. And in 2023, we made the penalties for bypassing an aquatic invasive, an open check station, much more severe than they had been in the past. On the heels of that 2010, which was a really busy year following that legislative session, because we had to rapidly come up with a regulation to implement the requirements of the statute. We developed that regulation. The original Chapter 62 includes a specific list of the critters and the plants that the commission considers a threat to the state or listed as a aquatic invasive species, as all of the other program guidelines that don't appear in statute, at least the original ones, and the original decal fees. That statute that was passed in 2010 does say all watercraft will have this decal. So we, unlike some other states, we do charge a fee for non-motorized watercraft as well as motorized watercraft. In 2013, we implemented the requirements of the 2012 statutory change and made the regulation changes needed to move that inspection program to our borders. In 2016, the decal and watercraft registration permit were combined as an option, and that required some changes to the regulation. We also allowed a proof of purchase of a decal to work in lieu of a decal as proof that you had purchased something for up to 15 days. And we allowed the non-motorized decals to be moved between non-motorized watercraft. So somebody with 5 non-motorized watercraft didn't have to necessarily purchase 5 stickers unless they'd all be on the water at the same time. And in 2017, along with a number of other states throughout the country that were trying to really institute the clean, drain, dry message, we required bilge plugs to be removed during transport. Whenever watercraft are out of the water, the bilge plugs have to be removed. In 2018, we exempted a few additional craft from needing a decal. The original regulation just exempted inflatables 10 feet in length and shorter. In 2018, we added paddle boards, float tubes, and sailboards to the list of things that don't need to purchase a decal. And then in 2022, the last change that was made to the regulation was to extend the period for which the proof of purchase was good from 15 days to 30. And that was just to ensure those things are coming out from our headquarters at times and people don't always get them in time. 15 days wasn't proving to be long enough all the time for people to be proved that they had purchased a decal. So about 7 years ago or so, Fish Division embarked on a major task to develop rapid response plans for how the department would react should we find a dreissenid mussel in water of the state. And that's complicated when it's not a commission-owned water or a commission-operated water. When it's owned by the state park or the Bureau of Reclamation, there was a lot of coordination that had to occur to figure out who would do what for these 23 different plans that were developed for our highest boating use waters around the state. The commission approved those plans in July of 2021, but in the course of their development, we identified a number of shortcomings of the regulation and a few potential ones in statute that would prohibit us from doing the things that, from doing all of the things that are in those plans. Some cases, there's an argument to be made, but clarifying language would be helpful. In other cases, we simply don't currently have the authority to do everything we'd like to do. So that's one of the primary reasons that you'll be seeing a regulation change proposed for that will come to you in July. In addition to the regulation changes, the AIS statute is one of those that has a lot of details in it, rather than just giving the commission the authority to keep AIS out of the state. There's quite a bit of information in there. So the dovetailing of the statute and the regulation is fairly complicated, and you can't change both at exactly the same time. And if we open a statute, we don't know quite where it'll end up, as you all know. So there may be some additional statutory changes that we would like to see. I think there should be, but as you have heard, we decided not to suggest that as an interim study topic. It's probably not necessary for that. We think we have the support from the legislature, at least probably TRW. If we have to suggest a few of these changes they'll cover, we could, but I think it's wise to get the AIS regulation ironed out first, because that really dictates what's needed in the statute. But one of those changes that we think needs to be considered is to allow our inspectors to require that a decontamination be performed on a vessel. The statutory language right now says that has to be done by a peace officer. But as you know, our wardens aren't always at our check stations, and we'd like to give that authority to our certified aquatic invasive species inspectors. We'd like to clarify that those same inspectors have the authority when a vessel is leaving, shows up at a check station and says, I'm not going any place in Wyoming, I'm just headed to Seattle. that we can still require an inspection. And right now that's questionable. Could argue that we don't. We'd like to expand the inspection authority beyond the border ports of entry and things that are identified in statute so that those same inspectors, rather than peace officers, could operate as a boat's leaving a positive water. If keyhole were positive, we would want to have a mandatory check station come up, be there, and not have to have a peace officer there all the time. And there are a few additional things that could be added if they don't get approved in the regulation. So the regulation that you'll see in July, I'm just going to hit the rough outline of the changes, but when you see it, it'll look like it was bled on very, very heavily because we found it rather confusing and have learned a lot over the years. So we attempted a complete reorganization of it. We added a few new terms and definitions and things like that, some clarifying language, but the real substantive changes are to clarify the authority for those inspectors to do these exit inspections if whether a water's positive or not, but really critical that a positive water. I think you've all heard the term seals. We have inspection seals that are affixed when a boat gets inspected at one of our mandatory check stations. That it's a little cable locking device that attaches the watercraft to the trailer. That cannot be removed until you get to well, it can be removed at any time legally, but it's the proof that your boat has been inspected and potentially decontaminated. What we were trying to accommodate was there will be times if we have a positive Glendo that all the boats coming off the water just simply can't be inspected. It could be a thunderstorm and during a walleye tournament, it could be that a decontamination unit goes down and we just can't get to them all. So we were trying to prepare for that in the course of our rapid response planning. And we developed a second kind of seal in the regulation called a prohibited launch seal that really means the opposite. It means this boat came off of positive water and it's dirty. So that would be this likely red seal that would be completely different. And we would like to add language that requires any boat owner coming off of water that the commission is designated as positive or infested with the really bad stuff, mussels, to seek out an inspection and decontamination on their own. If we were not there for some reason, they take off at midnight, and that they could not legally go to another water in Wyoming and launch without seeking out a decontamination. And we're proposing adding to the list of vessels that don't need to be inspected when they come into the state, stand-up paddle boards. Right now, there's a discrepancy between the list of things that need a decal and the list of things that need to be inspected. And we're just trying to bring those into alignment to make it simpler for the public. If you have to have a decal, you have to have an inspection. If you don't need a decal, you don't need an inspection. And these really are pretty low risk watercraft if you're talking about a stand-up paddleboard. Not many compartments or anything like that that could hold water. We propose adding a third, what we call emergency prohibited AIS to the list with zebra and quagga mussels, and that's the golden mussel that is spreading in the western part of the country that has the same devastating impacts to water bodies as those other two. And as you guys all talked about yesterday, one of the few things that the commission has control over when it comes to department revenue is the cost of a AIS sticker or decal. Those fees have been the same since the inception of the program in 2010. And we suggest that they should be increased to some amount. The statute requires us to collect these fees. It doesn't say how much they will be. And we have a fee structure that has since 2010 been $30 for motorized watercraft registered outside of Wyoming, $10 for those motorized watercraft registered in the state, $15 for non-resident, non-motorized, and $5 for resident non-motorized. Those non-motorized fees are somewhat unique to Wyoming, and they're not popular by any means. And we're not suggesting increasing those. Those are oftentimes some of the lower risk watercraft compared to bigger complex things. So we're going to suggest an increase in the motorized fee from 30 to 50 for boats registered outside of the state, and a doubling from 10 to 20 for those registered in the state. As was talked about yesterday, when it comes to the budget, the budget that was presented yesterday suggests the AIS program budget is about, I think I remember, $2.4 million for FY27. That was actually the budget after deducting grant funds that we get from the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Bureau of Reclamation. So the total program budget for FY27 is actually closer to about $3.2 million after the employee raises are instituted for the AIS program. But about 850,000 of that is paid for with federal grants from the Bureau of Reclamation and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and another 500,000 comes from a federal program called WRDA. So our AIS coordinators spends a lot of time trying to secure those funds, and we hope the legislature continues to support that federal grant funding that's so important to this program, because after decal sales, which are currently bring in an average of about $770,000, the commission's portion of the FY27 M&O budget is closer to about 1.1 million. This proposed increase in fees would bring that commission obligation down closer to like $660,000. So the stage we're at right now is that the proposed regulation that you haven't seen yet is with our legal counsel for review. We hope to file the changes with the governor's office by the end of the month. Then we'll have a public comment period and consider whether or not we're going to make any changes based on public feedback. And then the regulation will come to you all at the July 14-15 meeting. And with that, I would try to answer any questions anybody might have.
I don't have a question, but I've got a comment. That boat lift headed for Alcova was just a pure stroke of luck that was caught.
Yes, President Jolovich, members of the commission, that was an interesting story, but that photo is of a boat lift that came out of a main stem reservoir in South Dakota. The owner brought it to Casper, had it in his driveway and started looking at it and realized there's a bunch of critters on here, and got under there and started carving them off with a paint scraper, and realized it was a bigger job than he could handle, and contacted us. And our folks went out there, realized that there were zebra mussels all over the street, and headed down towards the storm sewer and many more, and spent a whole lot of time cleaning up the street, the sewer, and the vessel, got it into our office. And what you're seeing there really doesn't portray how many mussels were on the thing. It had a giant water tank underneath it, and the thing would be pumped full of water to sink and put the boat on the water, and then the water pumps out and lifts the boat out of the water, and that thing had inches of mussels encrusted on the inside of it. So our folks spent a great deal of time on that, and then since learned that there are other operators of marinas around the state. One's at Keyhole that gets docks out of Texas, and they're always covered in mussels, and so contacts us, and they try to get them cleaned off, and do get them cleaned off before they go in the water. But that's an example of a conveyance that we want to clarify in our regulation is a threat to the state, and has to stop at our borders when coming into the state, because that thing almost went right into Alcova Reservoir. So it would have been bad. Thanks.
Morning, Dan.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the commission, Director Bruce. I'm Dan Smith, Wildlife Division Chief. And based on Commissioner Roberts' request at the last meeting, trying to give an update on horses and game wardens. And I did, with your permission, expand that a little bit to the entire Wildlife Division and not just game wardens. So horses and game wardens have been together since the beginning. And this is a picture of Albert Nelson, first game warden in 1899. And I've always found it great that his horses were just as much of the picture as he was. And those are used horses. You can see some markings on them that they got their use, and that was his way of getting around. And as you'll recall, Albert Nelson was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2023. So horses and game wardens have been around since the very beginning, and maybe the relationship there isn't as tight as peanut butter and jelly or green shirts and red trucks. But it is a part of our game and fish culture, and the field people enjoy using horses, and people in the field enjoy seeing us using horses. So where are we at today? Horses are used by game wardens and biologists in approved areas across the state. Most of the horses that you see are owned by department employees. They're not owned by the department itself. And so there are a few department-owned horses within the state, but the majority that you see out in the field, those are personally owned horses. Each approved district has an allotment of horses ranging from 1 to 4. And when you add all the horses up, and I was a little bit shocked by this myself, I had to do a little research to do this presentation. Across the state, we have 117 horse allotments, and that includes districts. There is 15 horses. Some of those are department owned, used by the large carnivore section. And that also includes supervisors, warden supervisors, wildlife coordinators. And so it's not just district biologists and game wardens, but there are 117 allotted horses across the state, roughly. I would also say that not all of those are used at all times. So for example, if a district goes vacant for a while, we wouldn't be using those horses at that time, but that's roughly what we have allotted out right now. So I'm not a graphic design person. And so I had to use colors and maps that I can create as a chief. And so I did put together a couple maps. On the top right is the biologist districts that are approved horse allotments, and the bottom left, the warden districts, and the number that's wrote in there is how many horses they're allotted. So how do they get approved to have a horse allotment? And so it's approved by the division supervisor and by myself, the chief, and it's based on need. If you know some of the wardens across our state, if they can come up with a way to acquire a new gadget or tool, they'll ask for it. And so if everybody could have horses, they would all love to have that. But I've also had requests for things like e-bikes, and it really doesn't quite fit yet into our schedule of what we're going to allow game wardens to have. And so it does have to be approved, and it's based on the need of the district and not just the desire to have one. So I try to ask the question, does the horse benefit the department and the public, or is it just a fun thing to have? Are there areas in the district that are really difficult to get to, why you would need a horse? And so if you go back to that map I previously showed you, most of those are mountainous areas, steep country, areas that don't have as many roads or quite as good of access. And so it allows our game wardens and biologists to get around. If approved, it's then added to their JCQ, which describes their job position, and they are required to use those horses 12 days out of the year. I know that sounds really easy to do. So you say one horse, that's one day a month. But really in Wyoming, typically, not this winter, typically you only can use horses about 6 months out of the year. So now that takes it down to 2 times a month. And if you're not doing any overnight trips, that means you need to be using that horse about every other week through the summer. And so most of the time it's not a problem. For most of our folks, it's not a problem, but it does have some kind of baseline. If we're gonna pay you to have a horse, and pay you an allotment for it, then you need to use the horse. I did have a game warden tell me this year in January, he used his horse more than he used his snowmobile. So that just kind of tells you the winter we had this year. So how does that add value to the department and to the public? I'll start off with law enforcement. So it's great to be in the backcountry. People expect us near parking areas or places that you can easily access, they're not as likely to expect you in the backcountry. And we have a lot of backcountry in Wyoming. And our wardens and biologists do a great job of covering that, making their presence known in camps, and getting out and checking people in the field. And the times that I've been in the backcountry and run into hunters, they really love seeing you back there. They know that someone's back there, and they also know that you're looking out for people who maybe aren't following the rules. Bear conflict management, if we couldn't get around on horses, it'd take us a lot longer to get into these bear investigations. And that horse does add a little bit of security when you're trying to go into a scene to have a horse with you. Wildlife surveys, not only official surveys, but just getting out and knowing your country, knowing what's out there, what kind of wildlife is where and when it's there is very important. And then public access, trying to get into some of these access areas and get around in them requires horses. So like the Cody Access Coordinator has a horse allotment. As I was working up there, there's actually two places that you can't get to by road. They are hiking only, and they're several miles into those places. And I was really amazed before I was using horses at all. I went out with Craig Sachs and watched him tie 8-foot posts onto a back of a horse and take it through the trees and get to a place where we could put signs up for one of the walk-in areas around Cody. Sometimes you just, you're trying to get out and learn country, and sometimes you just need a little help from your horse to figure out where you're at. So all this does come with a cost. And so first of all, I want to recognize the cost that employees put into this. It's a huge expense. It's a huge responsibility. And if we didn't have guys willing to buy their own horses, I'm not sure that we would have the horse culture that we have. So game wardens and biologists, they're buying their own horses. If you go back a decade, horses were pretty cheap for a while. That's not the case anymore. I think if we were trying to buy a solid horse, you'd be paying at least $5,000 a horse. And yeah, as Commissioner Haskell said, probably go up above that. And you kind of get what you pay for. And I've worked with game wardens that are really great horsemen. And so they're willing to pay that lower price and train the horse themselves. I also know people that need to have a pretty well-rounded and ready to go horse when they purchase it. And so there's a big expense there. The other side of that is, things happen in the backcountry and you can lose a horse really quick with no indication that that's going to happen. And that responsibility is also borne by the employees. So if I have a 3-horse district and I lose a horse in the backcountry, now I'm out the money that I paid for that horse. And plus I need to replace it and try to come up with another horse for it. We don't buy saddles and tack for the riding horse, and so the employees are responsible for coming up with their own saddle. And then we also don't provide really a place for them to keep their horse, so they got to come up with a place to have pasture. Typically, they're either going to have to rent that. Some of our game warden stations now do include a little bit of pasture, so there's an expense there. You got to feed that horse, you got to maintain it, you got to take it to the vet, take care of it. And then it's great to say that your horse is ready to go, but if you don't spend time on it, it's not ready to go. And so there's time and training that comes into it. And typically we don't have game wardens or biologists charge time for that. They're doing that on their own time, keeping their horse ready to go. And so when we pay a horse allotment, which I'm going to cover here in just a minute, we expect that employee to have a ready to go horse. No different than if you rented a backhoe from a dealer, you'd want that backhoe ready to go. You expect there to have gas and oil in it and it's just ready to work. And so we've created this expectation for our folks that they need to have a horse ready to go. So on the department side of that, we do pay horse and pasture rent to those folks that have an allotment. And so just recently, that got raised to $75 per horse per month for each of those categories, so about $150 per horse per month. When hay prices are good, that almost will cover the cost of feeding it. When hay prices aren't good, it doesn't get very close. And it still doesn't really help you with all those other things like taking it to the vet or making sure it's up on shots all the time or replacing equipment that gets broke. And so there's an expense to the department. If you take 117 horses and multiply that out, that's just a little over $210,000 a year that we pay out for that. We do buy a little bit of tack for pack horses, so pack saddles and pads, to try to keep people equipped that way. And like I said, we do have a few horses that the department owns. And then when you take on that expense, you're also taking on the vet bills and the maintenance of that horse. If we're gonna have somebody have a horse and they're gonna use it for work, you need to supply them some equipment in order to haul that horse around. So we do have a lot of horse trailers around the state that we've paid for. And then we do try to provide some training for our folks, especially if they're new into the horse business, try to give them some horsemanship training. So we're really lucky. Right now we work with Fiddleback Ranch and Dwayne Hagan, and that guy's a horse whisperer. He can make horses do things that you just wouldn't believe a horse is able to do. And so there's just some pictures there of some of the horse training there. It's a lot of desensitization. The last horse I had was really great about a lot of things, but a shiny sign that's posted to a tree, like in the Forest Service, that was the big boogeyman. So it was like all things came to a stop when you saw a little reflection tied to a tree, like a snowmobile sign. Didn't mind a bear running across the road or didn't mind a moose standing there, but a shiny sign was a big deal. And so Dwayne does a great job along with our horse committee of helping desensitize horses a bit, as well as building confidence and skills with the people that are riding them. And so I did want to recognize the horse committee because the guys that are on this horse committee are excellent horsemen as well. So Jordan Winter, Travis Crane, Cody Bish, Jake Miller, Levi Wood, Dave Hyde, and Nick Roberts. Those guys are guys that work for us, and they are top hands when it comes to horses, and they share that experience and training with a lot of other folks to try to get people up to speed. Just some more training on the indoor arena at Dwayne's place, just a lot of different things that a horse could encounter to try to make it not panic when it first reacts to it. And one of the things I really enjoy when I went to horse training that I didn't think I would ever do is trying to play football on the back of a horse. And that sounds simple, but when a ball comes flying over from somebody else over the top of your horse, that you're going to find out how quick your horse is going to be able to move side to side and how well you're going to stay in the saddle. So just some final thoughts on horses. They really are an important part of the history and culture of our agency. Oop, went too far there. In my experience, there are a few things better than looking down the trail through the ears of a horse. There's just something that's really gratifying about that. Hunters and anglers really appreciate seeing us out in the field on horses, and you get to contact people in places that they would never expect to see you, and you can cover a lot of country doing that. It allows employees, both biologists and game wardens, to learn the more remote aspects of their district, and that helps as they talk to other people about the district and places where they can go to hunt and fish. It helps them have that firsthand knowledge. And there's really some aspects of the job that just couldn't be done without horses. And I just had to add some gratuitous horse pictures here. There's a mix of biologists and game wardens there. And some of the best experiences I've had working for this agency has been going to places that I'd never would have gone on foot if I didn't have a horse, and working with people that were really skilled in that and building those relationships. And so I just wanted to share some pictures of that country. And then just thank the commission and the department for the support of horses in our culture. And hopefully we can carry that into the future. And so I would stand for any questions you might have.
Mr. President, if I may. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. The questions I have relate to the reimbursement that we pay our employees. And as you said, there are situations where there are employees who just have to have them, and circumstances where they're needed. So what I'd like to do is just drill down a little bit about the compensation, rent, pasture, those kind of things that we reimburse our employees for those things. I was looking at, I think it's your slide. I don't know. Anyway, you had a slide with the cost up. I can't read it. 8. Rent $75 per horse per month. And I'm wondering if, is that a realistic amount? Is that fair to them? If they're required to have a horse, and it's necessary for their job, are we making it so they don't go in the hole in order to have that horse? So there's a bunch of sub questions like when was the last time that was looked at, or do we adjust that for cost of living or cost of hay like you were talking about? So can you just kind of like I rambled, just give me some thoughts on that?
Mr. President, Commissioner Masterson, I'm not real good at rambling, but I'll do the best I can. So we have increased that twice, probably in the last 15 years. It was just recently raised from, I think just a year ago, from $55 for each of those to $75. And so it's not really a reimbursement. We don't expect them to save any receipts for anything like that. If they're meeting their allotment over a course of a year, those 12 horse days per horse, then they can submit a reimbursement, although it's not a reimbursement, but they can submit an invoice for that amount. And so we tend to pay that twice a year. That's how most game wardens and biologists submit for that. And so it is $75 for each horse and then $75 for each horse for pasture rent. Some exceptions to that would be if they're using department property to keep their horses on for certain months, we would deduct those months off. But for the most part, they're either going to have to use their own pasture or they're going to have to buy hay or pasture somewhere else. And so the hope is that that helps cover that. But does it 100%? Absolutely not. And that's why we've tried to increase it over time. Trying to come up with that number is very difficult without creating a huge deficit for us as well. Many of the people that use horses would have horses either way. And so some of them see this as, you know, I'm going to have a horse whether you pay me or not. And so this is an added benefit. And for many of them, it's pretty important that they have that because it is a requirement of the job. And so there's a lot of expense that goes into that. And there's no way that we're covering all of it at the current rate, I should say.
Mr. President, I appreciate that. And I understand the logic behind it. I would, if it's necessary for their work, I just hate to see someone go in the hole because they have to have a horse. I don't know how to address it, and I'll just throw that out there. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on it. I just hate to see them go in the hole because of a piece of equipment, for lack of, that they have to have because of their circumstances and their situation. So I'll
Mr.
just throw
President.
that out there, and I may be the Lone Ranger on this one. No pun intended.
Mr. President, Commissioner Masterson, I appreciate that sentiment. I feel the same way. I don't want somebody to have to go in the hole. And I even get more concerned in a situation where somebody loses a horse because now trying to replace that. There are some opportunities for horse insurance now that we've been trying to look into a little bit where you can, if it's going to cost you $5,000 plus to replace a horse, then it might be worth the $50 to $100 a year. It might cost you to insure that horse and help that way. And so maybe there's some way we can pursue it that way. But we did do a survey a few years ago about whether or not you would prefer to have a rented horse or your own horse. And surprisingly, the majority of them said, no, I want to have my own horse, but I like the idea of a rented horse program, but I want to have my own horse. And so we tried to look at different things. We tried purchasing some horses in different places. Some places it works okay. Large carnivore crew, it works really well. They have some department horses, and they use those for their more seasonal folks. The large carnivore crew that I worked with regularly in Cody, they all had their own horses. We've tried buying horses in other places, and in some places it comes more like the tragedy of the commons where who's responsible for it and who's going to take care of it. And so that's a little bit of a struggle. In my mind, if we were going to go down the road of buying more department horses, then we'd want to assign it straight out. Like we buy a horse and it's Commissioner Masterson's horse and you're responsible for taking care of it. It's not anybody can come and take it whenever they want. It's assigned to you just like your truck.
Mr. President. So, Dan, are there, do we require, are there any wardens that are required to have a horse? Or are they just, is it just, I know it's recommended and I know it's a necessary tool, but is it required?
Mr. President, Commissioner Bell, yeah, it's in their JCQ that they're required to have a horse. We are not going to force somebody to go into the hole to buy a horse. But we do talk about that. If you try to transfer to one of those districts, it's a horse district, we say, you know, this comes with the expectation that you're going to have a horse.
Mr. President, if I might, thank you. That's exactly what, thank you for that presentation. That sure cleared up a lot in my mind. And I think that's absolutely iconic for anybody that in our organization to have a horse that wants to have. We need to make sure and try to accommodate them so they have a horse. So it's just too important for me. But that was perfect. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may, Commissioner Masterson's question about, you know, making sure they're reimbursed or compensated. I mean, it just kind of speaks to the quality of the employees in the department. And I don't think it matters which division we're in. Yesterday, we learned about in the fiscal division, how they're operating at a bit of a deficit. You know, they're doing everything they can to stretch their dollars. And fish division's doing the same thing. And it just speaks to the quality of the employees. And that's something that I struggle with too, is how do we make sure that we're keep getting the best? And so that's something that I'm personally tasking myself with, is just trying to find ways that we can generate more revenue to make sure that we have these quality employees to do this work, because it speaks well to the department and that those kind of people want to be here and be a part of it. So thank you for that.
Mr. President, Commissioner Haskell, I can't state enough exactly what you just said. The appreciation I have for the field folks that are getting their own horses and doing this work. They love the work they do, and they really want to do it in this manner. And I should have said earlier too, I narrowed this to the wildlife division, but other divisions are using horses as well. Fish division, for example, uses horses to get in the backcountry to do backcountry surveys and to do backcountry fish stocking. And so it's not just the wildlife division that I focused on, but across the agency for different projects, different divisions are using horses.
I guess that's it. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, President Jalovich, members of the commission, Director Bruce. I'm Brian Parker. I'm the Habitat and Access Branch Chief. Before I dive into to my presentation, I just want to add on to Dan's talk. I was lucky enough to be invited to the horse training. I think he undersold it. That was an excellent experience, and the horses and the people that go through that training definitely come out the other side much more robust in their ability. So it's a solid training that the horse committee puts on. Okay, so Springer WHMA. I should also preface my conversation with the experts in this part of the world for managing our WHMAs are either on spring break or they're in the surgery right now. So you're left stuck with me. So if you hit me with some hard questions, I might look over my shoulder for some folks that may have a little more experience in this part of the world, but I'm going to do the best I can. So we were asked to provide the commission with just an overview presentation. We're not going to ask for any approval for anything of Springer, but I thought it'd be worthwhile there are 3 WHMAs in Goshen County. I thought it'd be worthwhile to look at those, and then we'll tighten the aperture and look at Springer directly. Okay, so I don't know if we have laser pointer's not working. So just a general map and kind of proximity to Torrington. There's Rawhide WHMA, Table Mountain WHMA, and Springer. So Rawhide is upstream from Torrington. It's about 816 acres. It's largely riparian habitat along the North Platte. And we acquired that in the late 70s as part of riparian mitigation for the Great Rocks Reservoir construction. Southeast of here is Table Mountain WHMA. Currently, it's about 1,700 acres. The majority of that is BLM that we manage with a memorandum of understanding with the BLM. The commission owns 175 acres, mostly wetland complex and nesting stopover habitat. And then Springer's 3,400 acres. The majority of that is commission-owned ground, and then there's about 600 acres of BLM, again, that we manage with through an MOU with the BLM. So just some representative photos. I'm to kind of put a face with a name. So in addition to the riparian habitat that I talked about at Rawhide, there's also 9 acres of irrigated farm ground. Incidentally, we'll be coming to you with a request at the April Commission meeting to renew our farming lease for that. So I know you'll be looking forward to hearing about that. We'll talk a little deeper detail about Rawhide next month. And the Table Mountain picture is looking off to the northwest, just kind of a combination of upland dense cover, and then what behind the tree line in the midground there is wetlands complex. So just a variety of wetlands and upland cover. So just some general wetland statistics for Goshen County. Depending on the year and the drought situation, there's approximately 270 acres of wetlands and 870 acres of ponds and impoundments. That supports, almost 150 different bird and waterfowl species across the WHMAs. On any given year, we're anticipating over 200,000 Canada geese migrating through this part of Wyoming, and we winter between 30 and 50,000 geese here. Additionally, the wetlands complexes in the county support 23 species of graded conservation need here. And in part of my research for this presentation, I spent most of my career in Landers, so this part of the world is pretty new to me. So I talked to a lot of people and just tried to get up to speed on kind of what are the issues are here. I keep hearing over and over and over again about how drought and water, or lack thereof, is a big driver for a lot of our management here, be it our wetland complexes, fisheries, and that sort of thing. I'll talk a little bit more in a few slides about that, how the implications of drought play into our management. So just an overview of Springer. There's 2 main pieces. This kind of more it's on the north-south axis. The southerly piece, I guess you can see the southerly piece here was acquired in 1948. And then there was a subsequent acquisition in 2021 of this northern piece around the Yoder School. It was 342 acres. The benefit of that, it came with a third of the Bump Sullivan water rights. So there are 2 main reservoirs on Springer, and just to get you guys reference on the tour that you had on Tuesday of the Downer Bird Farm is down in this corner here, just to orient you for those who don't know. 2 main reservoirs is Bump Sullivan and then Springer Reservoir. So our main management priorities here are managing for pheasant and waterfowl habitat. Springer provides critical stopover habitat for migratory birds. And then fish stocking, again, kind of water dependent. In conversations with Bobby Compton, the Laramie fish supervisor, it seemed to be the water, the lack thereof, is the real limiting factor on managing fish on Springer. The idea being that in Bump Sullivan specifically, if it goes dry every year, there's not much merit of stocking fish there. From a water management perspective, there's 2 main irrigation sources. Bump Sullivan Reservoir, and then Horse Creek, which provides water to Springer Reservoir. From a public recreation standpoint, there are 16 public parking areas, boat ramp, and then 20 public hunting lines that operate on a first come, first served basis. Again, infrastructure, I know was a topic yesterday. In addition to the bird farm, there's 3 staff houses, a bunkhouse for seasonal employees, office shop complex, and then 3 comfort stations for the public. So farming and water rights, there are 800 acres of adjudicated irrigated ground on Springer from Bump Sullivan and Horse Creek. We farm about 500 acres through using a contract farmer, using four pivots, gated pipe, and some ditch irrigation. Targeting mostly alfalfa and grain, to basically service the waterfowl and pheasant hunting in the fall. And again, targeting grain crops, dense dusting cover, upland veg, and wetlands. So some of the other recreational uses on Springer: 14-day camping limit, which is kind of par for the course across the state. Boating is available as water dictates. Trapping is a use and available, but it's regulated so not to create conflicts during pheasant season. And the fishing we talked about, just as a function of water fluctuation. But some of the species present are crappie, catfish, sunfish, bass, walleye, and perch, as well as killifish. So waterfowl hunting, in addition to pheasant hunting, is a big deal here. So there are 20 hunting blinds, largely around Bump Sullivan Reservoir, as well as a wheelchair accessible hunting blind that was made possible in partnership with the Two Shot Goose Club. And just some of the other hunt areas here. And then lastly, the Springer Special. You've probably heard of the Springer Special. So it's a special pheasant hunt, began in 1973. Since its inception, over 250,000 pheasants have been planted. Produced from Downer Bird Farm. Presently, it's a 21-day hunt, run from October 10th to the end of the month. Regulations indicate so we have 120 hunters in the field at any one time, and 360 pheasants released daily, culminating in a bag limit of 3 pheasants per day. Following the Springer Special, the WHMA is open for general pheasant hunting, and one of the big things, as I was just kept hearing from folks, that's really special and people really appreciate is the 3 youth hunting days. And that just facilitates a lot of multi-generational hunts, passing on hunting to the next generation and that sort of thing. So Tom's division produced a short video on Springer WHMA and the Springer Special. So Wayne's going to pull that up, just play that, and then we'll stand for any questions. No worries. So with that, stand for any questions.
Is it non-motorized on the boat launch? Do we know? And is there any ponds that stay open the whole time? I mean, it don't. Just checking for the largemouth season there. For a friend.
I honestly don't know the boating regulation on Springer.
President Jolovich, Commissioner Roberts. So on Springer, the Springer Reservoir opens May 1st. And yes, it is open to motorized traffic when it has enough water. Bump Sullivan, you can put a boat on bump, but it doesn't have a lot of water currently.
My friend was wondering which one's better bass fishing.
One with water.
Well, the one with water, we actively do not manage Springer Reservoir with fisheries because they drain it almost every year. It is truly an irrigation reservoir.
He appreciates that.
What is the water source for the reservoirs on Springer? Is it just natural fill or where's it coming from?
So President Jolovich, Commissioner Masterson. So the water for Springer Reservoir comes off the Horse Creek Irrigation District. So when you guys were out at the bird farm the other day, there's a irrigation canal that runs right beside the bird farm. And that goes to Springer. And then on the other side of the road is another ditch that fills Bump Sullivan, which we own the majority of water rights for.
Okay.
It's not part of like the GID system over on the Table Mountain side. It's
Thank you.
different.
I wasn't familiar with the rawhide HMA. Is it stocked with for pheasants? Is it, I mean, what takes place there? You said it was riparian primarily. Is it, what do people use it for?
So President Jolovich, Commissioner Masterson, so rawhide WHMA, years ago, we stocked it with birds. We don't anymore. It's primarily used for turkeys, waterfowl hunting, and that kind of stuff. We did a big Russian olive removal project down there. We've been doing a bunch of habitat restoration work. The North Platte flows through it. So.
Okay.
If I may, Commissioner, I spoke to Ben Milner, the manager of the bird farm. He said when they turn pheasants loose in rawhide, they just leave. So therefore, they don't do that anymore.
Understood. Thank you.
Let's take a quick 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:30-ish.
All right, again, good morning, President Jolovich, Director Bruce, and members of the commission. Justin Benfit, Deputy Chief Wildlife. I'm up here today to introduce Dr. Jason Carlisle and Dr. Christy Palmer. Jason is here today to give you guys a presentation on our harvest survey. This is a really timely presentation with season setting, in the midst of season setting and with the April commission meeting coming up. So with that, welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Justin. Good morning, President Jolovich, members of the commission, Director Bruce. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. I'm Jason Carlisle, a quantitative biologist in our wildlife division, and I'm excited to join Christy in talking to you about our hunter harvest survey program here today. Although Christy and I are the ones that'll be up here at the microphone here today, I want to acknowledge the broader team that really makes this program happen. We're part of the science unit in the wildlife division that's overseen by Amber Hall, who you'll hear from later in this agenda. She's critical to this work, also all the field staff in the agency that contribute. But I want to give a special shout out to Mike, Brittany, and Jared, who are on the slides here, who are our key partners at the University of Wyoming that really make this work happen and have improved the quality and efficiency of this work. So the management of harvested wildlife species has always depended on having a good understanding of the number of animals that are harvested. Indeed, this body, for a fun historical anecdote, back in 1940, said the following in reference to check stations. They said that during the past 2 years, a careful check has been made of the game animals killed in practically all the hunting areas of the state. It is felt that this is necessary in order to learn the number of animals taken from any given herd. It is also necessary to know the sex, age, and condition of these animals. This information is just as essential to an intelligent game management plan as it is for a stockman to know the age and kind of animals which he sends to market each year. So we believe that having a good handle on harvest numbers remains a necessity. If it was that important in 1940, it's certainly still important today. However, the size of this task has really changed substantially. If we look at just the 6 species that are depicted in these icons on the top of the screen, that same commission report from 1940 included an estimate that 8,000 individuals of those species were harvested in the state that year. If we fast forward to 2024, we've seen a 10-fold increase where 81,000 of those same animals were harvested in the state that year. So not only has the total volume of harvest changed, but the tools at our disposal and the team that makes this important work possible has also evolved over time. So if we look back to 1940, I enjoyed Dan's earlier presentation about the use of horses. I think a lot of the notes we can find from that time indicate that game wardens were out on horseback or driving around, operating check stations. And really the harvest numbers that we had at that time were from these game wardens, basically tallying up the number of animals harvested that they physically laid eyes on. And that field presence remains important today. But even as early as the 1940s, our department acknowledged that we weren't going to see everything that got harvested, no matter how many red shirts and green trucks we had out there. So even in the 1940s, they began a limited postcard mailing system where license holders who had not encountered one of these check stations received a postcard in the mail asking about their hunting season. I think that demonstrates a lot of foresight of the agency to undertake that effort even that long ago. If we move into the 1970s, this program received a big sort of boost with new involvement by the University of Wyoming. That team introduced the ideas of randomly selecting licenses and sampling hunters, and introduced some industry standard analyses that improved the rigor and the reliability of the harvest numbers that we use. The decades beyond, we've worked with a handful of partners and contractors through the years. The primary tool in those decades was mailed harvest survey questionnaires. We have a picture here from a 2017 Wyoming deer hunter survey. This was, about a 4-page printed paper survey that would have been mailed to tens of thousands of Wyoming deer hunters in the state. Nowadays, our primary tool has moved online. Most hunters receive their harvest survey through email. The surveys themselves are filled out through online survey platform. But we realize that all of our constituents are different, and email and online tools aren't the best tools for everyone. So we do continue to do some limited mailings, to have phone calls that go out to hunters. And also new this year that we'll talk a little bit more about, we've even sent some text messages to hunters, getting surveys into their hands and reminding them to contribute that valuable information. So critical to helping us and ushering us into this modern era of harvest surveys has been a new partnership with the Wyoming Survey and Analysis Center, or WYSAC, based at the University of Wyoming. We began a new grant agreement with them in 2023 to assist us with all aspects of our harvest survey work and other kind of human social science side of our operations. The folks at WISAC are fantastic. They are charter members of the Association of Academic Survey Research Organizations. They have decades of experience in this realm, really have a whole team of specialists in public opinion research and all aspects of survey research in general. They also have a full-service call center based in Laramie, where we can mobilize and reach large volumes of hunters in a short amount of time. And as part of this new partnership with WISAC, we have a new joint position between the university and the Game and Fish. It is a human dimensions specialist. So this position is occupied by Dr. Christy Palmer, who you'll hear from in a minute. And Christy brings a wonderful new dynamic to this team because not only is she a trained biologist, but she's also a trained social scientist and someone who has experience and expertise in understanding the motivations and the behaviors and the attitudes of the people, because people are a large part of what we do, as you well know. So I'll hand the microphone over to Christy for a few minutes to share a few more slides with you and then see you in a few moments.
Thank you so much, Jason. So the scope of the harvest survey effort encompasses 17 separate surveys for about 50 different species. We end up sending these surveys to about 250,000 people who hold 250,000 licenses. And the result of these surveys is about 300 pages of harvest reports, which are publicly available on the web page. While we have a bunch of species that we survey for and report on, the focus of this presentation will be the antelope, deer, and elk. The survey platform that we use is Qualtrics. Qualtrics is customizable and flexible. Oops. Yeah, there we go. The survey team tries to make survey completion straightforward and easy for hunters. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that the team does. The surveys are actually very complex, but hunters don't see that part. They just see the part where they're able to go from question to question. Some info like hunt area is pre-filled, but hunters can also adjust the hunt area if needed, like if they're hunted in a cross hunt area. There's also maps in the survey, so hunters can check those maps out if they need a refresh on where they hunted. The Qualtrics also provides validation. And so if somebody puts in a number that would just not be anywhere near correct, like let's say they said that they hunted for 1,000 days or something like that, the platform would catch that and it wouldn't let them move on in the survey. And so that helps prevent us it prevents a lot of errors from going in. And so those are catched in advance before the hunter even completes their survey. So most people in this room have probably completed a harvest survey. While questions differ slightly depending on the species, the overall look and feel of the survey is the same. We ask, did you hunt? Did you harvest? And their hunt area. We ask the age and sex of the harvest animal, the date of harvest, the number of days hunted regardless of hunt success. And I should mention here that it's critical that we hear from both the hunters who hunted and hunters who, well, obviously hunters who hunted, but we also want to hear from hunters who did not harvest and hunters who just didn't get out that year. And so we really want to hear from everybody. And so that's really critical to our process. We also ask about weapons used, and the level of satisfaction is at the end with the Likert scale. The very end, right after level of satisfaction, are comments. And so hunters can leave any comments that they like to leave for the Wyoming Game and Fish staff. These comments can be paired up with the hunter's contact information if the hunter decides to leave that there. And so if they want to leave their name and their phone number, that's totally optional. And Wyoming Game and Fish staff have the option of reaching back out to that person if they want to, if they feel like they need to follow up with that person. So not everyone gets a survey. It might feel like surveying everyone is better, but it has challenges, including cost and social challenges. We use random sampling, which is the industry standard and the best practice. Licenses are randomly selected based on hunt area and license type combinations. And we need to make sure that we hear from enough people that our harvest estimates are sufficiently precise. We know in advance that most hunters won't respond, but we have a target number of people that we'd like to hear from these hunt area license type combinations, and we survey more people than that target number. We'd like to hear from at least 25 to 30% or more of licensed hunters. There are a lot of surveys where we hear from much more than that, like the moose survey, the bighorn sheep survey, and the mountain goat survey. But at a minimum, we'd like to hear from that 25 to 30% for most of our surveys. The main survey effort begins in mid-October and it extends through the end of January. Oops, I went the wrong way. And even a little bit into the beginning of November. So we start off with a big email invite. And the top picture is a picture of the email invite. It's got the hunter's name on it. And we send a very large quantity of emails out in that middle of October. And then we send email reminders and we send postcards to people who don't have an email address. We also send a postcard reminder. So there's a QR code on the postcard. So hunters can go to that, scan the code and go and take their survey from there, or they can, if they choose to, they can enter the website address to go to their survey as well. We also do a lot of phone calls to hunters for those hunters who want to complete their survey from the phone, or we just need to hear from them because of their hunt area license type combination. We also this year started text messaging hunters, which was pretty exciting. We only sent one text message per hunter, so we weren't sending any more than one. And this was a last ditch effort to get more responses after we tried everything else, after the person had received emails, postcards, and phone calls, still trying to hear from them. So we sent that email, which was pretty successful and late in the season. So this is deer survey numbers. So just to give you an idea of the number of people that we reach out to and our survey effort, we, just for emails alone in 2025 for deer, we sent about 155,000 emails. We sent 39,000 postcards and we called 19,000 hunters. After all that, we, for those people who didn't respond to any of those methods of outreach, we send about 25,000 text messages to hunters at the end of the season. We're constantly monitoring the responses as they come in, and we monitor by hunt area and license type combinations. And we are keeping an eye on some of those hunt areas where we might have to really focus our calling efforts on those places where maybe we just need to hear from a few more people. So we don't call hunters unnecessarily, but we have a very targeted group of people that we call depending on their hunt area license type combination if we need to bump up that response rate. Most people do complete their survey online through email or text or using that QR code. We have about 12% that completes their survey over the phone. And WISAC has a call center. This is a picture of the call center at the University of Wyoming. The call center employs UW students and also employs Laramie residents. And those folks are calling hunters on behalf of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And it's a critical component of the survey process. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Jason.
Mr. President, if I may, before Dr. Palmer, if I may, I'm curious what at the end of all this, the emails and the phone calls and the text and everything else, what's your approximate response rate at the end of it all?
That's actually what we're going to talk about on the next slide. It depends on the species.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
you.
Yeah, of course.
Commissioner Masterson, I think I owe you $5 for a nice segue into this slide. That's fantastic. You asked about the response rate. That really is a critical aspect of any survey effort. And so we've got some real numbers here to share with you from the 2025 harvest surveys for antelope, deer, and elk. The pie charts that are on the slide here, the blue slice is, I think, what you're asking about. The blue slice, like for example, for antelope, 31% of license holders, we heard from them, they completed a harvest survey. As Christy mentioned, we don't survey everyone. We have established targets for the number of responses we want to receive to have the level of precision that our managers require in these estimates. But you can see that for all these species at a statewide level, we were able to reach those targets this year, hearing from 31% of antelope license holders, 33% for white-tailed deer, 34% for mule deer, and 30% for elk. The sad fact is that a lot of people don't respond to our surveys, right? So the red sections of these pie charts show you the percentage of licenses who received a survey but never responded. So in order to reach those sample size targets, those response rate targets that we mentioned, we actually ended up having to survey 60 to 90% of license holders, depending on the species, because really about half or less of the survey recipients, at least for these species, ended up completing the survey. That really varies a lot by species. You know, we have, say example, bighorn sheep. Almost everyone wants to tell us about their bighorn sheep hunt. And so we commonly are close to 100%, if not 100% response rates for things like bighorn sheep. On the lowest end of the spectrum, you know, our annual survey for small game and game bird license holders, we probably only hear from, I think, 15 to 20, 25% of hunters total. And we do survey basically almost everyone we can get a survey to in that effort. But this is sort of where we're at for the primary species that drive a lot of our survey work and our conversations. So once those survey responses all come in, the next task for our team is to analyze those data, to generate the harvest estimates that the department needs. And we get a lot of questions here. You know, if, for example, you know, if we're only hearing from 30% of hunters, how can we possibly have a harvest number that we can have any reliability in? And I don't know how often this body is asked to do math, but we're gonna do a little math exercise here today. So pull out your calculators if you want. I'll do the heavy lifting. But just to illustrate how we get these numbers, I want to use some real data for the deer hunt area that we're in today. This is hunt area 15 for mule deer, region T for non-resident general licenses. And we estimate that in the 2025 hunting season, non-resident general license holders harvested 223 bucks in this hunt area. That's at the bottom of the slide. But let me show you how we get there. So first we need to know how many licenses were issued and valid in this hunt area. So working with our licensing section, we know that there were 401 of those non-resident general T licenses issued and valid this year. To reach our sample size targets and understanding that we probably wouldn't hear from everyone we sent a survey to, our team decided to send a survey to 182 of those hunters. Through all the follow-up that Christy mentioned with emails and phone calls and postcards and texting, we were able to receive responses from 90 of those hunters that were surveyed. And in those surveys, we learned that 50 of those 90 hunters reported harvesting a buck. The others either hunted but did not harvest or didn't hunt at all. But based on that, we can calculate the average success of a license holder. So in this case, 50 bucks harvested out of 90 hunters that we heard from means that the average success of a license holder here is about 56%. And if we assume that that 56% applies to all the license holders, all we have to do is multiply 56% times the 401 valid licenses to end up with that estimate of 223 bucks harvested. So as you can see, the math itself is not complicated, but the assumptions are really important, with the key assumption being that the information we receive from the people who do complete the survey is a fair representation of what happened with all the people we also didn't hear from. So that 56% success rate, we're assuming applies to everyone, even though it really came from this survey of 90 responses from 90 people. So now that you know how the math works, you know, and that math could be done on the back of an envelope, to actually generate the full set of harvest estimates that our managers need, we have to repeat that math a whole bunch of times. This slide is my attempt to wow you as someone who spends a lot of time writing computer code. I know this might fall flat, but our team basically just to generate the deer harvest estimates had to write over 6,000 lines of custom computer code to do all the aspects of this process, from sampling licenses to analyzing data and producing the harvest reports that we needed. Because keep in mind, you know, we just the slide before generated one estimate for kind of one group of hunters here in the southeast part of the state. But in order to generate our antelope, deer, and elk harvest reports, there's about 1,500 unique combinations of hunt area, license type, and residency that we have to do that math for. So computer code is the way that we do that math quickly and consistently and reliably. So what do we get from all these surveys and all this number crunching? You know, the primary output that most people are familiar with is an estimate of the number of animals harvested. So for example, on the right, this allows us to track something like the trends in statewide antelope harvest, which you can see in that graph, both at a statewide level and by residency, which you can see there. A little bit lesser known, but also very important to our managers, is an understanding of hunter effort. And by hunter effort, I mean the number of hunters afield, the average success rates of those hunters, the number of days it's taking them to fill their licenses, those sorts of things. So for example, this graph on the right shows the mule deer herd units in the state and the number of hunters that were in the field pursuing mule deer in each of those herd units last year. You can see a lot of variation throughout the state. Those bright yellow areas in the Wyoming range and the Black Hills are places where we had over 3,000 hunters out pursuing mule deer last year. And that's valuable information for our managers. Lastly, we generate or we gather very valuable hunter feedback. Christy mentioned that hunters are asked to provide a satisfaction rating for the overall quality of their hunt. For example, this graph shows the trends in satisfaction for a couple elk herds here in the southeast part of the state. And hunters are also allowed to leave us sort of open-ended comments. And those comments provide a really valuable source of information for our field staff who are formulating hunting season recommendations. You know, our people are very boots on the ground. They're out in the field. They're talking with hunters. But, you know, just to give you a sense for scale, we had last year almost 14,000 comments submitted from our antelope, deer, and elk hunters. It would take a lot of hours at the check station to talk to 14,000 hunters. So this really does provide a really valuable public input to our managers. I think it's important to note that these comments are not part of the formal process for submitting comment to the commission on proposed regulation changes or things of that nature. That is a common confusion that we hear from some of our people who are leaving comments, but this information really is valuable for our staff as they're trying to get a finger on the pulse of the hunting season and make changes and plans for the next year. So I hope I've convinced you that the data we generate is valuable to the department. To sort of hammer that point home, I thought, you know, you don't have to take my word for it. We provide a little testimonial here from one of our field staff. So this is something from Gary Freilich, who recently retired as a wildlife biologist in the South Jackson and Star Valley area. But Gary, in speaking of harvest surveys, said that these hunter harvest surveys identify essential data and provide that key informational link to department managers and the public, which guides the management of a species, especially in a place like the Wyoming Range, which Gary helped to manage, where the mule deer herd is subject to periodic extreme winter mortality. It is vital that we track harvest-related statistics not only on an annual basis, but consistently over time. These harvest data sets are essential in the cycle of adjusting hunting seasons and engaging with the public. And as you can see in the figure on the right, you know, this is one part of this cycle where we're surveying, you know, our big game populations. We're in helicopters and airplanes. We're also talking to hunters. We're operating these hunter harvest surveys. They are a critical piece of the puzzle. So now that you've seen how we use some of these data for harvest management, I thought you might enjoy a quick look at how else this harvest information is getting used. For example, on the far left, harvest information was used by the Game and Fish and our partners at the U.S. Geological Survey to conduct some cutting edge science on how harvest can be a tool for the management of chronic wasting disease in mule deer. In the next example, you know, our department and the commission used harvest statistics to help understand elk population trends and make plans for feed ground management into the future. The third one there, moving away from big game, but actually our cottontail harvest statistics over time are being used by the Draper Natural History Museum and the Teton Raptor Center to understand trends in golden eagle populations, which are closely linked to those of their prey species like rabbits. And then lastly, You know, these harvest statistics are ingested and used by any number of third-party groups that are offering services to hunters and planning where to hunt and how to apply for licenses and those sorts of things. So switching gears a little bit, now that you have a sense for what the harvest program looks like at the department, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the challenges we face, some of the sort of current issues we're grappling with, and some of the opportunities that we see as we look to the future. Some of the challenges we face are not unique to us. An especially valuable aspect of our partnership with WISAC is that WISAC staff, you know, conduct public opinion research and public health and all other aspects of social science. They also work beyond the borders of Wyoming. And what they've noted is that, just broadly speaking, there's declining institutional trust and a general decrease in the willingness of people to participate in surveys generally. You've probably noticed this yourself. But this sort of general decline in response rates has implications for our work, namely in the form of non-response bias. That's something we'll return to in a few slides and talk a little more about. But specific to our surveys, one of the primary challenges is just the really tight timelines that we have to operate on. As you know, the sort of season setting machinery and process has some really quick turnaround times, and it's a long process. And so we're often being asked to report harvest not very long after those hunting seasons are even closing. And so our team has adapted and put systems in place that allows us to do all of this very quickly and very efficiently to meet these tight timelines that are demanded by our managers. One of the second challenges we wrestle with is one that I think this body will be very familiar with, but you know, the regulations governing our hunting seasons are very complicated. I have about a 60-page booklet right here that describes hunting just antelope, deer, and elk. And our hunters enjoy a large degree of flexibility in where and when and how they hunt with any given license. But accommodating that flexibility and that regulatory complexity in the way we survey people and the way we analyze the data is a real challenge. And it's something that I'm proud to say that I think we have risen to the task and we are accommodating that complexity, but it's not a simple survey and not a simple process by any means. Lastly, I would say one of our challenges is just managing expectations, both within our own department and for our external stakeholders and customers. One of those expectations is that I think a lot of people misunderstand that and think that the numbers we put out there are the absolute truth. You know, my training is in biology and statistics, and statisticians, I think, have to be comfortable with something that we call uncertainty and precision. But I think many of our managers and many of our publics perhaps aren't as comfortable with the fact that there's margins of error on all of these numbers and there's uncertainty around all of these numbers. As Christy hinted at, there's a trade-off here. You know, sure, we could spend twice as much money on this program and shrink that uncertainty a little bit, but I think we're at a good point where we have a level of precision that is needed by our managers and a cost and an effort that is practical for us to implement. So returning to the topic of non-response bias, non-response bias occurs when the people who choose to participate in a survey are systematically different than those who don't choose to participate. I like this cartoon because this person here, you know, conducted a survey to see if people like to fill out surveys. And not surprisingly, the people who filled out the survey said, yeah, I love filling out surveys. So we have to keep in mind that the lens that we're viewing the harvest numbers through really is this survey, and that lens sort of affects the information we learn and how we should interpret that information. The way non-response bias is manifest really in the harvest survey is become evident over the years as we and contractors and partners have dug a little deeper into this issue. It's really from two sources. The people that we have found are most likely to respond to the survey are people who hunted and people who were successful. Those are the people that are eager to tell you how it went. The people who are least likely to respond to the survey we have found are the people who did not hunt or the people who hunted but were not successful. Now, that's probably not surprising, right? This is sort of human nature. But taken together, this means that our harvest statistics can be artificially high if we don't try to account for and minimize this non-response bias. If you think back to our estimate for Hunt Area 15 here, right, we found that 56% of people we surveyed were able to successfully fill their tag. But if we're only hearing from the people who are the most successful, you can see how it'd be easy for those numbers to get unrealistically high. So we have systems in place and processes that allow us to attempt to minimize non-response bias. It's certainly not absolutely gone, but I think we have minimized it to a level that we're comfortable with. The primary way we do that, not to get too much into the weeds here, but we have found in working with WISAC that the best way to conduct this and the best way to reduce non-response bias is to have a relatively small random sample of licenses and then to work those licenses, to remind those people, to call them, to contact them, to do everything we can to make it easier for them to respond to the survey. So it's better to have a small sample that we work sort of intensively rather than a really large sample that, you know, maybe you'll get one email, but you're never going to hear from us again, which really leads to just those really successful hunters being the ones we hear from. We find that the people that we are reaching at the very end of our effort through the text messages, through mailings, through phone calls, oftentimes those are the people that did not hunt or the people who were not successful. And sometimes they're surprised and think, oh, I didn't know you needed to hear from me because I actually didn't have a chance to hunt this year. And we remind them that we need to hear from everyone. And it's critical, and it's become evident that that enhanced outreach effort is a critical aspect of getting the accuracy we need in these harvest statistics. So a common idea that's out there, you know, if we just need to hear from more people, some people are wondering, then why don't we just mandate it? Why don't we just make everyone respond to our survey? Doing so, you know, mandating harvest reporting would certainly have some benefits, right? It would likely increase public confidence in some of our harvest estimates. And I think it's a sort of mathematical fact that higher response rates would produce at least slightly more accurate harvest estimates. I say slightly because I think we're already in the realm where they're precise enough for our needs. But I think a mandatory reporting system would also have some serious costs and drawbacks that would need to be considered. First of all, it shifts the burdens to hunters. The obligation now rests with them to complete their survey or face some sort of penalty or fine. In talking with other states that have mandatory reporting systems, it's become very clear to our team that those systems require penalties and enforcement to actually be effective. And those enforcement actions are likely to be unpopular and, you know, would likely require some regulatory or even statutory changes to even be able to implement the sort of fees and penalties that would probably be required to make a mandatory reporting system work. So to date, the department has not opted to go down this road of expanding mandatory harvest reporting. But you and other astute observers might be asking yourselves, wait, aren't some surveys already mandatory? And there's a bit of nuance here. So this slide is meant to kind of explore this issue in a bit more depth, where we've listed up the species, or in some cases the surveys. You know, the small game survey is one line here that we operate every year. And we made a distinction here with two columns. The first column indicates species for which it is mandatory to register your harvest in person with a Game and Fish staff member. So you're probably aware that if you harvest a mountain lion or a black bear or a bighorn sheep, the regulations mandate that you bring that harvested animal to Game and Fish staff, register it with them. They're going to collect some information and data about the harvest that is valuable to us. And so you can see in that middle column, there's 7 species where it's currently mandated that you register your harvested animal with Game and Fish. There's actually only one species, bison, for which it is mandatory to complete a harvest survey. So in recent years, we've been issuing just under 100 bison licenses, and those 100 license holders are required, whether they hunted or not, whether they filled their tag or not, to complete more or less a harvest survey, return it to the agency, and tell us about their hunt. But important to note, a bighorn sheep hunter who doesn't harvest or doesn't hunt has no mandatory reporting requirements. It's entirely voluntary for them to tell us about their hunt. And for, a lot of these, well, if you look on the right side there, you can see that there's a lot of voluntaries in that zone. Most of our surveys are entirely voluntary. It's really only bison where we have that mandatory survey. So this is a bit of a nuanced distinction, but I hope this sort of helps you understand where we stand currently. To give you a better sense of the broader landscape around mandatory harvest reporting, in the last few years, we've conducted interviews with some neighboring states and learned that there's at least 9 states in our region, including Wyoming, that have at least some form of either a mandatory survey or a mandatory harvest registration for at least one or more species. Now, you probably noticed there's a lot of squishy language in that because the approach really varies quite a bit from state to state. And the compliance rates or the response rates also really are variable state to state and appear to depend a lot on how aggressive that state is in their enforcement actions of that mandatory reporting requirement. Some of the penalties that are being assessed by other states for people that do not submit these mandatory surveys by a designated timeline include monetary fines. In some states, those are up to $50 per license if you don't complete the survey by a certain time. Some states are also issuing tickets and citations to those who don't complete a mandatory survey. And then some states, I'm sure this one isn't really popular, but you become ineligible to receive a future license if you do not complete your harvest survey for the license you hold this year by a certain time. So what do our hunters want here? We gained some valuable insight into that question a few years ago. In 2023, we conducted a mule deer hunter attitude survey. The results of this survey cover a lot of areas of mule deer management and have been presented to this commission in the past. But I want to highlight one of those questions where we asked if resident mule deer hunters support mandatory harvest reporting. And we define that as meaning that every license holder would be required to complete a harvest survey regardless of whether they harvested an animal. I think we were a bit surprised to find that 57% of those people surveyed, or I should say of those who chose to respond to the survey, right, suggested that they support this mandatory requirement. So I think knowing that there was interest out there among our stakeholders, the department and our team has spent some time sort of investigating the pros and cons and sort of the prerequisites, if you will, of what it would take exactly to implement a sort of mandatory system. And I'm not going to get into the details here. I'm not going to get too far in the details here, but I think the important question is, where does the department currently stand on the issue of expanding mandatory harvest reporting? And simply put, it's our assessment that at this point, the benefits just don't appear to outweigh the costs. As mentioned several times in this presentation, the Harvest Survey Program is a game of trade-offs that largely balance cost and the accuracy of the information received. And when I say costs, I mean certainly the standard financial costs and financial capital, but also the social and political capital, the time and the other resources that it would take. It is our team's professional assessment that the department's current approach, which is based largely on voluntary surveys, provides sufficiently accurate information for wildlife managers and other stakeholders. Mandating the completion of, say, mule deer harvest surveys would have enormous social and other costs, despite likely only producing marginal gains in the quality of the data products and the deliverables that we receive. So this is certainly something that we're happy to discuss more and engage with in greater detail, but I'll move to sort of wrap up the presentation here in a few slides and try to reserve some time for questions and discussions with you all. I think with all this talk of mandatory reporting, it's important to ask ourselves, since we're in a system now that's almost entirely voluntary, what are we doing to encourage those voluntary completions of surveys, and how can we, lean more into the carrot than the stick, if you will? And I think we're doing a lot in this area, and we've been making strides in recent years to really make it as easy as possible for people to complete our surveys. In short, we we utilize a lot of reminders and a lot of modes of touch points, if you will, to help people remember to complete those surveys. Now, as you know, there's a very fine line between reminding and nagging. And so we try not to overdo it here. You know, every time we send out a batch of emails to non-responders and say, hey, just a reminder, if you're done hunting, like we'd love for you to fill out your survey. Every time we do that, we get a few people who are a little upset that we're bugging them, but we also get a huge wave of responses that comes in. So those reminders are really a necessary component of this work. And you know, the postcards we send out, the phone calls, the text messaging, all of this whole system of outreach is really trying to make it easier for our hunters to complete these surveys. Christy also mentioned that we really try to keep these surveys short and user-friendly. We're very stingy on adding questions. There's a lot of things we'd like to ask our hunters, but we want to really only use a couple minutes of their time to fill out these surveys and not get them too long and bloated. As she also mentioned, people can complete these surveys online or over the phone. Another wonderful benefit of our partnership with WISAC has been enhanced customer support and enhanced local customer support. A lot of hunters have noticed that, hey, there's a 307 number that I can call and get someone on the line who will walk me through my survey, take my information, not force me to go onto some online system. And we really commend WISAC for extending the customer support capacity of our agency in this area. We also conduct a prize drawing and raffle off donated prizes to people who complete their harvest surveys. I'll share a little more on that in a minute. We also make the resulting harvest survey information publicly available, trying to help hunters see how this information is used and how valuable it is to us and to others. And in working with our communications and education division in recent years, we've made strides in better communicating the purpose and the importance of these surveys to our hunters. So I mentioned the prize drawing. We want to acknowledge a handful of organizations here who have graciously donated prizes the last couple years that we've been able to raffle off. The pictures on this slide are some of our recent prize winners who we asked to share a photo of them in their hunting endeavors, and those are certainly some satisfied customers from what I can tell. And this whole harvest survey endeavor really depends ultimately on hunters and their willingness to participate. We often get asked, you know, like, what can I do to help? What should I do as a hunter to contribute in this area? And our request is simple. We just ask that you complete any harvest survey that you receive from the Game and Fish or WISAC, even if you didn't hunt, even if you didn't harvest an animal. And in order for, to make that easier on a hunter, you know, it's important that they keep their contact information up to date with the agency, especially their email, since a lot of our survey outreach is through email, that they keep an eye on their inbox and that they let their voice be heard and that they share their interesting perspectives and ideas and valuable information that can help us understand harvest. So in conclusion, I want to just highlight what we see as some opportunities for improvement or some areas that we're committed to continuing down the road. I hope I've convinced you that this is a valuable and a high quality product that we produce for the department and other stakeholders. I think we can continue to ensure it is that as we continue to focus on participation, making it easy for hunters to fill out those surveys on quality. You know, we're always taking steps to enhance our data quality control and to accommodate the regulatory complexity and flexibility that's inherent in our system. We're also making strides in integration, meaning that we're strengthening the connections with existing game and fish data sets to really maximize the use of this valuable data. And then lastly, with Christy and our WISAC partnership, we're leaning more into the human dimensions of wildlife conservation. Because as you all know, in our mission, you know, we're in the business of conserving wildlife and serving people. And I hope you agree with us that these harvest survey programs are really key to both sides of that mission. So we thank you for your time and are happy to stand for some questions.
Mr. President, I might. Can you explain to me, you know, I know whether it's a hit point for migratory or the new sage chicken thing, could you explain a little bit? Does that just give you a baseline as far as, because it wasn't, anyway, could you explain that a bit?
Yeah, President Jolovich and Commissioner Roberts, I'll address specifically the new sage grouse permit because I think that illustrates your point. Yeah, as you're probably aware, the department has instituted a new sage grouse permit that's free to hunters that was required the last two hunting seasons. The primary motivation there was driven by this harvest survey program. And the challenge that that permit was meant to address is the fact that, to hunt sage grouse, you need a game bird license. But because of the lifetime licenses, pioneer licenses, dailies, annuals, every year there's somewhere around 60,000 people that hold a license that's valid for game birds, meaning there's 60,000 people that might be hunting sage grouse. But our best information suggested that really only a few thousand people a year were actually hunting sage grouse. So in order to better identify those people and gather higher quality information from them specific to sage grouse, that permit was implemented. And when we now conduct a sage grouse harvest survey, we're able to work with our licensing section to know exactly who has a sage grouse permit and to reach those hunters directly to ask about sage grouse information.
Mr. President, if I may, thank you for this presentation. Very informative and a lot of great information. On page 14, the process of tracking response rates, there's a little differentiation there between whitetail deer and mule deer, and it just shows, who wasn't surveyed, what percentage responded, and then the percentage that didn't. I'm wondering on the differentiation between the mule deer and the whitetail, is that based off of like type 3 and type 1 licenses, or was that as a result of the surveys saying which species they were hunting?
Yes, thank you, President Jolovich and Commissioner Haskell. Yeah, our deer harvest survey has the added layer of complexity that we are asking about two different species, as you've noted here. In this case, we're presenting information. The whitetail deer information is all licenses that were valid for hunting whitetails. So it's not just the type 3s and 8s.
Okay.
But my understanding of the regulations is actually that every deer license is valid for hunting whitetails. So that's what's represented there, where the mule deer licenses are only those that are valid for hunting mule deer.
Thank you for that. And then thanks for that clarification. And then one other thing, I've asked this a few times in commission meetings, but to maybe support or supplement your data, as a licensed outfitter, I'm required every year to send my harvest reports into the Wyoming State Board of Outfitters and professional guides. Do you guys source that at all for any information? Because that is stuff that's there. We're required to report that.
President Jolovich and Commissioner Haskell, at this time, we are not using that information in our harvest survey program. What is the timing for when you have to submit that information?
January 31st. I think there's an exception for trophy game animals, specifically mountain lions, because that season's still ongoing.
Sure.
But I know that big game animals, January 31st is our deadline to have that stuff submitted. And I just pulled up their website and because I was going to look for the form that I fill out. I don't remember what all is on it. I know it asks the hunter's name, town, state, license number, species, hunt areas, dates in the field, dates of harvest if successful. And then looking on their website, I just found their 3-year statistics, and they've got it broken down by species, number of clients, whether they were successful or not. So it's pretty simple data, but I think it could be something to supplement what you guys are doing as well.
Yeah, that is helpful. Thank you. As I noted on our last slide, integration with other data sets and systems is something that we need to continue to explore. This seems like it could be a fruitful option. Our check station data from our own department staff operating in the field is a data set that's underutilized in producing our harvest estimates. So yeah, this is certainly something we'd be happy to engage with and explore at a deeper level.
Good. Now, I guess I have one more question. Sorry, Commissioner Bell. So as an outfitter, I've noticed at our lodge, our camp, when game and fish personnel come through there to check things, whether it's a warden or a biologist, I've noticed that they scan a QR code on the back of either the carcass coupon or if they have the other portion of the license with their name on that. Is that a similar, what they're doing, is that similar to what would be happening at like a check station?
Yeah, President Jolovich and Commissioner Haskell, yes. So our department has a mobile app, whether you're at a check station on the side of the road or encountering a hunter in a field or a camp, where that QR code is able to populate some of that license information into our check station database.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll also note, if I may, that, you know, it's key that we hear from a representative sample of hunters, right? And, you know, outfitted hunters, non-resident hunters, resident hunters, those folks tend to have differences, right, in their success rates and the way they hunt, the number of days they're spending. So as we strive to incorporate some of this information, we have to make sure we're balancing that with sort of having a representative sample from everyone and not leaning too much into just hearing from the people that are most likely to have filled their tags. Thank you.
Mr. President, I was just going to say that similar information from licensed Wyoming taxidermists is available, and they have the same time frame of reporting. So, and they're all successful if they're at that stage.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is, Mr. President, there's no information that attorneys could provide that would be of assistance in this effort. A couple questions, if I may. First, thank you for your work. I mean, it's foundational to our ability to manage game, and it's very, very appreciated. One question about this slide. You say surveyed 60 to 86% of license holders. Okay, got it. But using antelope as an example, does that mean that 31% of, say, 60% of license holders responded? Or do you mean 31% of all of the license holders responded?
Yeah, President Jolovich and Commissioner Masterson, the latter. So it's
Okay.
31%
Got
of
it.
all license holders.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was translating that right. Okay. The second question I have is, how do you determine that your conclusions are statistically valid? And try to keep it, short words, sixth grade level. I'm just wondering, how do you hit the point where you hit the button and go, good, we're good, we got enough numbers? And how do you do that?
President Jolovich and Commissioner Masterson, that's an excellent question. If I'm hearing you correctly, it's really, your question centers on how we know how many people we need to hear from. How do we set these sample size targets that tell us we're going to have a statistically valid and sufficiently precise estimate? Is that a fair characterization?
How do you know how do you know it's reliable, or, I mean, in a layman's sense, reliable information?
Yeah, I appreciate that. In short, we set, well, the number of survey respondents that we need to hear from, we determine based on our own criteria that we want our success rates to have a margin of error of plus or minus 10%. So for example, if we're harvesting 1,000 mule deer in this area, we want our estimate to be plus or minus 100 deer. Now that's a decision made entirely by us, right? In cooperation with our managers, that seems to be a level we're comfortable with. I have some of those margins of error for specific herds if people are interested, but that's sort of the guiding principle, plus or minus 10% in our margin of error. That tells us how many people we need to hear from. And then if we can get a random sample of license holders and hear from as many of them as possible to reach that target, then we're comfortable that the estimates are valid at that point.
My follow-up would be, how do you know you're within a 10% margin of error?
Yeah, Commissioner Masterson, I think every statistician relishes a question like that. I'll try not to like bust out a whiteboard or something here, but there are basically statistical mathematical formulas that if we know the sample size and we know the success rate, we can calculate that margin of error.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for keeping it, yarn and blocks and things like that. I have, if I may, Mr. President, I have kind of it's a YSAC ish. It's not really a question. I don't think, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I wonder if, because yesterday we were talking about the value of our wildlife to the state of Wyoming and what hunters bring and what anglers bring and what wildlife viewing brings to the state. So here we have someone who is co-located with WISAC, and the only numbers I could find was that 2017 University of Wyoming study that I forwarded to everybody. And I just wonder if this is something that maybe next meeting or something like that, somebody from the department could get with WISAC and see what it would take to get some kind of updated figures on what is the value as we go and talk to policymakers and people like that about what is the value of the resources that we are charged with overseeing and managing. So I'll just leave that out there. I don't know if anybody shares that interest, but if we had some figures, if we had something that we could hang our hat on, perhaps it might help us make some management decisions and convince others of the importance of what the decisions we make.
Mr. President, if I can comment, thank you, Commissioner. We're already thinking along those lines, so I'm glad great minds think alike. But we have had past surveys in the past, been talking to the Hop School as well. So more to come. Yep.
Thank you. Mr. President, I just had one more thing. I appreciate this. It's great. And I really seem to focus on the mule deer more so just because it seems like we have so much, so many, I'd say, issues with mule deer and the decline in numbers and the fact that we have these enormous general areas that I feel like sometimes we don't know exactly how many hunters there are and if they're targeting mule deer and all of that. And so I'm curious, and I understand, and I thank you for telling me why maybe we shouldn't have mandatory hunting or mandatory reporting, but I still feel like sometimes it would help me answer the question of we have more hunters than deer in an area. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it is, but we get some of those questions on general areas and I don't even think that's a question at all. I still wrestle with that in my mind, thinking that if the hunters were 100% successful of all the hunters that were in an area, we actually could probably shoot all of the buck deer in an area. I know that's never going to happen, and there's so many variables, but I don't know that we even know totally exactly how many hunters we have in a general area, and the statistics on that are probably very difficult. But I appreciate you guys doing this job, and the fact that we have 57% of the mule deer hunters that were okay with mandatory reporting makes me lean more that way, and the ones that oppose it, only 9% strongly oppose it, and they'd probably oppose all reporting anyway.
And then the 22% in the neutral.
Right. Anyway, I know there's no question in there. Thank you for the work you do. I appreciate it.
Well, if I may, President and Commissioner Bell, we acknowledge that general licenses are more difficult for us to get a handle on harvest numbers. Truth be told, any sort of flexibility or complexity with a license makes it more difficult. When we have an antelope license that's valid for this one place, for this one season, it's a little more easy for us to get a handle on what's happening. When it comes to mule deer and general licenses specifically, we do take efforts to receive sort of the higher end of our sample size targets. Like, we're trying to boost the number of responses we receive. We also spread out that target throughout the state because there's, I think, a lot of geographic differences in where people are hunting with their general licenses. So we track where the license comes from and sort of put you in that bin. If you bought your license in Converse County, we need to hear from a certain number of people in Converse County, and we're going to work them until we do. We also, in acknowledgement that many deer licenses are valid for mule deer and whitetail deer, we add an additional sort of multiplier to the number of people we want to hear from, acknowledging that that information is both going to be used to squeeze out some whitetail deer numbers and some mule deer numbers. And so we sort of set our expectations higher on those sample size targets accordingly. I hope that's responsive to your question.
Mr. President, have you ever done fishing? Whether it's a satisfaction or did you fish within the last year? You know, if so, what did you fish for? Have you ever done that kind of work?
Yeah, President Jolovich and Commissioner Masterson. So my role, since I am housed in the Wildlife Division, has been solely on the wildlife focused surveys, but I know that WISAC has engaged with our fish division and they could probably speak to more details there, but I know they have conducted a few angler surveys and are engaged with the fish division as well.
I appreciate that.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning still. President Jolovich, Director Bruce, members of the commission. Our last speaker today is Dr. Ember Hall. Dr. Hall supervises our science and research and analytical unit. She is going to give the commission an update on the mule deer focal herd project.
Thanks, Justin. President Jolovich, Director Bruce, members of the commission, it is my honor to round out your agenda today and give you an update on the department's ongoing mule deer monitoring program. It is now in year 4 of 5. So this was part of that one-time budget approval, that your budget request that you approved yesterday. And again, we're in year 4 of 5. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge my co-author on this talk, Lucas Olson. A lot of the analysis and figures that you'll see here are a product of his work. I think we all know this, but I also think it's worth spending a little bit of time to say mule deer matter to us. They're an icon of our Western rangelands. They play really critical roles in ecosystem function. And for a lot of us, they feed our families. They matter to us. But despite this importance, we've seen a 60% decline in mule deer in Wyoming over the last 2 decades. And I think, as all of us know, those declines aren't specific to Wyoming. They're happening across the range of the species. Maybe. There we go. So that's sensitive. Okay. So in 2022, you, the Game and Fish Commission, authorized the department to do a top-to-bottom review and enhancement of how we monitor mule deer in the state. And the reason for this is good monitoring is essential to good management. It's hard to know how well your monitoring programs are working if you don't have a good one underneath you to inform a lot of those management and conservation decisions that you're making. So this program focuses on 6 areas that we consider really critical to management. I'm not going to go through all of them. This is a very large program. I'm not going to talk through all of them today, but I am going to just give you some highlights of some things that we've been able to accomplish over the last year. So these 6 areas are cutting edge information on harvest and public values. You just heard about some of those from Jason and Christy, but we're also thinking about things like getting good data on herd composition. How many fawns are there in a population relative to does? We're also looking at disease assessments, putting together more reliable information on herd sizes, making sure that we're turning data that we've collected back around to managers so they can use them in our management decisions, as well as a really thorough assessment of survival, habitat use, and movement. So if you're thinking that's a lot, it is, and we're really grateful for your support to be able to work through this program. As I said, I'm just going to hit some highlights here, and this is one that you already heard about. So those updates and improvements to our harvest surveys that Jason and Christy talked about, we're enacting them on the ground right now. So 45,000 mule deer hunters were able to interact with those smart surveys, those precision targeted sample size guidelines, as well as those new engagement techniques like text messages. Those all happened last year. And while Jason and Christy are a little humble, I am very proud to say I think we are getting the best data that we ever have on mule deer harvest information. Now, harvest gives us really good information on how many animals hunters are removing from a population. But I think maybe a little bit to Commissioner Bell's point, we also need to have good data on how many animals are in a population, how many animals are supporting that harvest that's pulling animals out of it. So I think those of you who have heard me give an update before will be a little bit familiar with this, but understanding how many animals are in a population, it feels like it should be easy, right? Like we can all count. So this feels like something we ought to all be able to do. But mule deer and other species are often really cryptic, right? They're hard to see. That's why we don't have 100% success on our hunting licenses, right? Like mule deer are tricky to find. And so if you want to get a good estimate of the size of the population of mule deer, you need to have some standard surveys and techniques in place that help you account for that fact. These are called sitability surveys. They are, what we use to estimate abundance is called a sitability survey. They are industry standard, and they are also expensive. So the funding that you have provided in the last 4 years has allowed us to collect abundance information for 25 of 37 of our mule deer herds. That's incredible. The funding that we had prior to this program allowed us to do one of these surveys every year. In 4 years, we've done 25 of them, thanks to your efforts and support and the work of all of our on-the-ground field people to pull these off. So otherwise put, with your funding, we've accomplished in 4 years what it would have taken us a quarter of a century to do otherwise. So thank you. In addition to thinking about how many animals are in a population, how many mule deer are in our populations, we want to know how well those animals that are there are actually surviving. Survival is one of the big components that drives how big or how small a population is. So I'm going to spend a lot of the rest of my time giving you an update on what we're learning about our tools for estimating survival. So to date, in this component of the program, we have marked just over 3,400 mule deer with GPS collars. That's a big number. And I'll tell you, with that size of a number, in my mind comes a whole lot of responsibility, because putting a collar on an animal, it doesn't necessarily make that animal's life better. So we have to make sure that what we're learning from that collar answers our questions and provides us with the rigorous information that we need to absolutely make the most of this opportunity and these data. So I'll introduce you to what we call our focal herd program. This is an intensive monitoring program that we started in November of 2022. And for this effort, we selected 5 herds across the state, and they're shown there on that map in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And you might notice that these herds are pretty different, right? So for us here in Torrington, the Laramie Mountains is the closest focal herd. That's really a grassland-dominated system with a lot of short and medium distance migrants. Now, if you juxtapose that to, say, the mule deer in Upper Shoshone mule deer tend to be long-distance migrants. They're often traversing from winter ranges in, say, Cody, across the Absarokas into Yellowstone National Park, and in even some cases into Grand Teton National Park, and are spending their summers on the backside of the Tetons. That's a very impressive long distance movement. It's really remarkable. And this system is also more sort of shrubland, alpine, montane habitat dominated. So very different ecosystems, and that's by design, because we're trying to understand how mule deer make a living in the incredible ecological diversity that is Wyoming. And do mule deer across the state need all the same things all the time, or are there different management levers that we can be pulling on that are targeted and specific to those populations? And that's what we're going to try to answer through this effort. So in each of these herds, we maintain a sample size of 80 does, 30 bucks, and 100 juveniles. So I want to show you a little bit of what data starts to look like as it's coming in from all of these animals that we have on the air. One of the purposes of this work really is to try to get good estimates of survival. So the next couple slides, I'm going to show you what that survival looked like for 2025. Before I do that, I'm always scared to press the laser pointer. Did it work? Oh, there's it. Okay, there we go. I got it. Okay, so just to orient you to these figures, on the y-axis, on the x-axis, that's that horizontal axis is time. So you have from January 1, 2025 to December 31, 2025. Then on the y-axis, that's that vertical axis, you have the percent of animals surviving. There's an inset map there to help you kind of orient yourself where each of the colors of those 5 herds are going to align with the lines that you see on the screen. Okay, so this is what doe survival looked like in 2025. Now remember, does are really the engine of your population. They're what's going to help your population grow. So as you can see there, Wyoming range enjoyed pretty high doe survival in 2025, which is great. They came in at 91%. Average, according to sort of the authoritative literature, average doe survival across a lot of time and space is about 85%. So we're seeing high survival in 2025 for does in the Wyoming range, pretty average survival for Upper Shoshone and Laramie Mountains, with Sweetwater and North Bighorn coming in slightly below average. If we turn our attention to juveniles, you'll remember we have 100 juveniles marked within each of our herds. If we turn our attention to juveniles, now juveniles are the younger and generally the more vulnerable cohort that we study. That means that their survival is going to tend to be more variable. And that's what we see here, right? We see just a little bit more separation in those lines, with Laramie Mountains, Wyoming range doing really quite well, followed by North Bighorn, Sweetwater, and Upper Shoshone. Now, before you take too much stock into this variation, let me tell you 2 things. So the first is average sort of literature, authoritative documents are going to say juvenile survival tends to be around 55%. You'll notice that in 2025, all of our estimates were above 55%, which is great. The other thing I'm going to tell you is that I'm cheating here just a bit. So I think Jason described uncertainty really well. As somebody who thinks about numbers and statistics, you should never trust me when I tell you that something was exactly this point estimate. So there is uncertainty around each of those lines. I'm not showing it here because it makes the figure really hard to read, but I can tell you that while it looks like there's a ton of difference there, statistically there isn't quite as much difference as it looks like. One of the values of this project in particular is that we have multiple years of data. So I've been talking about 2025, that's a snapshot in time, but I think we all know that this last winter was anything but normal. So having multiple years of data helps us begin to understand not just what mule deer experience in 1 year, but what they experience over the range of conditions that are possible. So this shows survival for Sweetwater juveniles in each of the years that we've had them enrolled in this study. So the colors, I probably should have changed this. So for orientation, Sweetwater is in the middle of the state, sort of south and east of Lander. And each of the colors in this case are representing years. So 2023, 2024, 2025, and the pink line is 2026. I think all of us can probably remember the winter of 2022, 2023. I'll say at that March Commission meeting, I couldn't go home at the end of the meeting because roads were closed due to snow. At this meeting, I'll call it the pink line meeting. At this meeting, I could be standing here talking to you in shorts and a t-shirt. That is an incredible diversity of conditions, and we've had the real fortune to be able to study these populations across that gradient of condition. Now, whether you are experiencing a lot of cold and snow, or whether you're experiencing basically summertime like we are now, we know that bigger juveniles survive better. And really, that isn't just specific to mule deer. That's specific to a whole bunch of ecological classes of animals. Bigger is usually better for the young ones. So in the second year of this program, we started weighing our juveniles to try to dig into some of those survival patterns that we were seeing just a little bit more. So across the board, we've now weighed 605 animals. 40 from each of those 5 herds. And the average weight of those animals, of juveniles, is about 75 pounds. That's the average juvenile. But it turns out we see a fair bit of variation that could be starting to explain some of the larger demographic patterns that we see. We'll dig into this just a little bit more. So here on the bottom, that x-axis is the herd. So Laramie Mountains, Sweetwater, and Wyoming range. And on the y-axis, that's your average weight. Now I've classed this between December, which I'm showing you here, and January, which I'll show you on the next slide. And that's simply because for anybody who's been around kiddos, we all know as you age as a kiddo, you also grow really quickly. Well, the same thing is happening in our juvenile mule deer, right? They're growing quickly, even in the depths of winter. So we don't really want to compare an animal weight in December to an animal weight in January. That's just kind of not a fair comparison. So what I want you to take away from this December data is that juveniles in the Laramie Mountains and juveniles in the Wyoming range weigh about the same thing. That is surprising to a lot of people. That isn't quite what folks would expect. But what we see is those juveniles are pretty much the same size. What we also see is that the juveniles that we weigh in Sweetwater in December are notably smaller. Statistically, these are smaller critters, and that may portend something about their survival later on. We move to January, we see similar patterns, though in this case, Upper Shoshone coming in at about, just under 80 pounds. So they're pretty hefty. And then our North Bighorn and Sweetwater animals are on the lower end of that weight distribution. Okay, I said being bigger in the case of a juvenile is better. You should be asking in your head, well, how much better? How much of a difference does that make? And I'll tell you, it's kind of a lot. So what we're showing you here is time on that horizontal axis from about January 1 to about going into, early summer. On the y-axis is your survival probability. Essentially, how likely are you to survive? So if you are a 90-pounder, you're shown there in purple. You're juvenile. When we weigh you, you weigh 90 pounds. You're a chunker. The orange line is the average, right? You're a 75-pounder. You're just running at about a C, but you may or may not make it. The kind of greenish line there, well, you're a little runty like me, but you think there's a chance you might make it. You weighed in at 60 pounds when you were captured. The story becomes very different as you move through the winter. So for the first 50 days, we see survival probabilities about the same. There's not a lot of difference going into February. But by the time we start to get out to that later tail into winter, we really see quite a bit of separation to the point that if you were 90 pounds at capture, you are almost twice as likely to make it into summer than you were if you were one of the little 60-pounders. So being a bigger juvenile makes a big difference.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Before you leave that, can you go back to that slide?
Absolutely.
Judge, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, you're on a roll, but
I'm on a roll.
can you equate the time in days to approximate time of year for me, please?
Absolutely. So out today, we ran this, I'm sorry, President Jolovich, Commissioner Masterson, we ran this out to 200 days, which is about July 19th. So that 0 to 50 days is going to be that mid to late part of winter. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, so this data gets me thinking about, well, how do we make big juveniles? If we know that this is what we want to have from a population perspective, how do we make big juveniles? And the answer is, it's a lot of what we're already doing. So one of the big ways you can grow larger juveniles is to have really high quality connected summer range and transitional range. So get a lot of high quality habitat on the ground and make sure that there's connectivity so that animals can reach and use that habitat. That's one way to do it. We're setting our juveniles up for success as they go into all the challenges that face them during winter. Another connection is really maternal condition, right? We want, for lack of a better word, we want moms that are in good shape as they're producing these fawns and as they're raising these fawns during the summer. So from a sort of a demographic and population management perspective, one of the ways to get moms in good shape is to have a big cohort of your population be that prime aged female. So we started to dig into that question a little bit more. what's the distribution of our prime age females in these 5 herds? What can we learn about that side of the equation? Well, it turns out this was way trickier than I ever expected it to be. So the primary tool that we have to learn about the age distribution of populations is of mammalian populations, and particularly ungulate populations, is through our teeth. And you might already be familiar with this work. But basically, you can age a free-ranging mammal that sort of has differences in their metabolic activity. You can age them by looking at a tooth, cutting into the root of that tooth, and there'll be little what we call cementum annuli. But they're little rings that are laid down that reflect differences in that metabolic pattern across years. For harvested species, the department uses these data all the time. And in fact, I'll give a tremendous shout out to Molly Bradyhoft. She runs our tooth aging lab. I have no idea how many teeth she touches and handles and analyzes each year, but it's an incredible resource for the department. The challenge with applying the tooth approach to this work is really that we don't collect teeth on live animals. So we only get information on age through teeth from dead animals. Well, okay, that's interesting, but we want to know about females. So now we're only getting teeth from the females that die. Then if you think a little bit more about that, well, who's likely to die, right? It's the animals that are otherwise compromised. They're more vulnerable to some sort of disease, or maybe they're just older, and so they're more likely to not be able to make it. That becomes a question then, right? So the tooth data that we're getting isn't reflective of what's going on in our populations. So for the last year, we have been working on a new technology that, to be really honest, I'm very excited about, and I probably need to reel in that excitement, but we partnered with Trent University, which is an institution in Ontario, and we're exploring this idea of using our genetics to age populations. This is what's called, it basically leverages the idea of DNA methylation. It's called epigenetic aging. So to explain that in sort of straightforward terms, as mammals, our DNA methylates. We're all sitting here methylating right now. Loads of fun. Methyl groups are essentially these chemical markers that latch on to certain places in your DNA. And those markers latch on at a predictable rate in a pattern that we can anticipate. So if we can figure out that pattern, if we can decode that pattern, that unlocks a biological clock for us. And then we can take things like blood samples, which we pull all the time during mammalian captures. We can take those blood samples, spin off sort of like an aggregated batch of DNA, ship that off to a laboratory that knows what they're doing, and we can get ages back. That is tremendous, and I'm really excited about it. We're not quite there yet. We've got a little bit more work to do, but this work is really being spearheaded by a postdoc named Luca Montana, his advisor, Aaron Schaefer, and then I have to acknowledge Cheyenne Stewart. She's the Jackson Regional Wildlife Coordinator. This was really one of the ideas she tipped us off to, and she's let me come along for the ride, which has been a lot of fun. So we're learning a ton. It seems really promising, and I hope that next year I'll be able to report back to you with some actual real age distribution data in our populations. Okay, so speaking of new technology, I wanted to round out the presentation with just a couple of updates on some video collars that we deployed. And you may all know what video collars are, but just if you don't, video collars are essentially, they're collars that collect all the same location data that our regular collars do, but they're fitted with a video recorder, essentially. And you can tell the collar you want to record videos at some certain increment, and it'll do that for you. So we did this work in partnership with APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. I'll be honest, I had to look that up. With APHIS, which is part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as well as the U.S. Geological Survey. And we did it for 2 reasons. One, we wanted to get a window into contact rates and how that varied across herds through the lens of trying to look at CWD, potential transmission. And then the second is that we really wanted to confirm birth events. I can talk to you more about why that's important if you're interested, but this gave us a chance to confirm those birth events. So rather than give you a whole lot of figures and data here at the end of your meeting, I thought I would go with some gratuitous cuteness. So this is a video that we got from the Laramie Mountains. Thanks, Wayne. And then the next one that we have is a video that we recorded from the Sweetwater herd there in the center of the state. So this was really helpful. Not only were we able to confirm a birth event, but we also know that there were twins on the ground, which is super exciting. So one of the pieces of this project that I'm particularly proud of is that as we've been getting data from all of these big efforts and all of this work that our field personnel are putting into it, we've been able to turn it around and use it for management decisions. And this is sort of unusual in the world of research, right? Sort of research progresses at one pace, and then our time-sensitive management needs progress at a very different pace, and trying to match those up can be difficult. We've had some really good luck here, and I just wanted to give you a couple of examples from the last year of where we've been able to apply these data. So we've used them specifically to help support the siting of wildlife crossing projects. We've used them in collaboration with our habitat protection program to help site wind turbines and make sure that we're hoping to help proponents put them in the best possible places. We've also worked with, through the region, we've provided guidance for Teton County and some of their land development regulations that they were considering, and on to a couple of other examples. So just really happy to see these data, really your hard-earned data, going onto the ground, being used for management essentially in real time. I want to spend my last couple of minutes with you updating you on some work that we're doing around elk. When we initiated this project, one of the directions from the director's office, Director Nesvik at that time, was, this is great. I want to understand a little bit more about elk and how elk are influencing mule deer. So this is some work that we started in collaboration with the Laramie region and the Casper region and elk hunt areas 6 and 7, really trying to pull on that thread of how do elk numbers influence mule deer numbers and mule deer behavior. So we're taking advantage of some ongoing, pretty focused elk population reductions to look at how mule deer respond. Don't have a lot to share with you at this point. This work really is ongoing right now. But I will tell you, we have 120 cow elk marked in hunt areas 6 and 7. That's 60 in each of those elk hunt areas. And by and away, in Southeast Wyoming, hunters are the main cause of mortality among elk. We've had a few other elk that have died from a few other things, but of the 51 mortalities that we've seen, the vast majority of those have been associated with harvest. We've also seen a really high degree of movement. And when I say high degree of movement, it was a whole lot more than I ever expected. So this figure here on the left shows you winter home ranges for 90 of our animals that we had on air. And this is for reference, the scale here. Cheyenne is shown down in the lower right of that map. Wheatland is up in the kind of the upper northeast corner, if you will. That's a big geography. If you know this corner of the state, that's covering a lot of ground. And those winter home ranges still pop out. You can still see them. So the average winter home range size for an elk in this part of the world is about 1,000, oh my gosh, I can't talk. 1,700 acres, 1,700 acres. That's the average size. And I can tell you that's big because if we juxtapose that to unfed elk in the western side of the state, their home ranges are about 10 times smaller. So their home ranges are much closer in the winter to about 200 acres. We have a lot to learn about why we see this pattern. My suspicion is it's probably because elk in Southeast Wyoming group up. They function in these much larger groups. And so if they're going to have resources to eat, my hunch is they have to move more than maybe some of those elk on the western side of the state. Could also have to do with snow distribution. We don't quite know yet, but this is an early finding that I think is interesting to have on your radar. We hope through this work, we're going to be able to both understand how to put better harvest on elk where we need it, to understand the formation of those large groups, why they happen, how they happen, and if there's anything we can do to manage it. And then finally, understand just a little bit more about how mule deer change or don't change their behavior in responses to changes in elk abundance. So with that, I would be really remiss if I did not give a huge list of thank yous. While I get to be the person here at the podium that shares all of this information and all this work we're doing with you, it really would not be possible without the work of now 8 regions, 4 out of 5 divisions, and 7 separate work units. So this is a department project that we really could not do without everyone's support, and that includes those of our partners listed at the bottom of the slide. So that's all I've got for you. And with that, I'll take questions if there are any.
Mr. President, if I may, Doctor, this is fascinating stuff. I love this. My only question for you goes to your winter home range that you showed. Set an average size on the east side of the Continental Divide of 1,773 acres. Apparently on the west side of the Continental Divide, it's about 1/10 of that. So that would make the west side of the Continental Divide much smaller,
Yes,
like a 1/10, roughly,
roughly.
as opposed to the east side of the Continental Divide.
Remember, all estimates have error, Commissioner Jolovich, or sorry, Commissioner Masterson.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure I understood that completely. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
You did say there was error in some of that, possibly.
Yes,
correct?
President Jolovich, Commissioner Roberts, yes, you should always ask about error.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, if I may, I thank you for this presentation. I agree, it is very fascinating. And there's a lot of valuable information here. This is, you said year 4 of 5? With this kind of information that we've been given in 4 years, is 5 years going to be enough? This is, I don't know, this is groundbreaking. I think about the research and potential of maybe aging with blood samples and DNA. Are other states kind of participating in this kind of work, or is Wyoming kind of leading the way on this stuff?
Yeah, President Jolovich, Commissioner Haskell, thank you. Yes, there is some other work specific to your epigenetic question. There is some other work ongoing through WAFWA, and Director Bruce might be able to speak more specifically to it. Our effort is, we started before the WAFWA effort got underway. And so we're pursuing this path that we have, but there is other work and other research ongoing, I think through Purdue University. Is that correct, Director Bruce?
Well, very good. Thank you for that. I appreciate your enthusiasm in this. I can see it that you're passionate about this work. And if there's anything that we can do to further support this, please don't hesitate to come back and ask. This is fascinating stuff.
Thank you, Commissioner Haskell.
Yeah, Mr. President, thank you. I want to echo all those thank yous. And we just collared some deer in the Sheridan region and the Powder River also here just not very long ago. So I look forward to seeing how that plays out. And I'm really curious because I think it's something we are always wondering about is that our exploding elk herds in some of these places, what that impact is on deer, on mule deer. And I mean, I kind of hope most of your cow elk don't live, but I mean, through the next hunting season, but don't take that. And that's not because they have a collar. It's just, you know, we need to do a better job of managing those cow elk. But no, thank you for this. And I'm also like you, I'm looking forward to not only being able to know what an age is by a blood sample, but maybe even somehow we're going to have a live CWD test at some point that is and allows us to do that on the hoof instead of deceased. So appreciate all the work and appreciate the updates. I really like these. So thanks.
Thank you, President Jolovich, Commissioner Bell. Thank you for that. And I can't speak to progress on a live CWD test, but I know that our vet services folks certainly can. All right. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. President, members of the commission, Director Bruce. One last agenda item. I know is not actually on the agenda, but wanted to bring to your attention that we have a Horse Creek Road, which leads into our Horse Creek WHMA in Teton County. It's one of our access roads into that unit, is experiencing some maintenance issues, some repair issues that are of some significance. And we just wanted to come to you today because we don't have specifically budgeted FY26 money for dealing with that issue. Wanted to get basically a recommendation from the department for you to authorize us to commit some funding to that project. We don't know exactly what that looks like just yet, so the amount is to be determined. But if we could get your blessing to move forward with committing some funding to that project, we will begin work on what that looks like and come back to you with a number.
Mr. President, can we get a cap on that number to commit? I mean, it's kind of a blank check you're looking for.
Fair enough, Mr. President. Commissioner Roberts, not necessarily a blank check. We certainly would want to evaluate what that would be and like I said, communicate to you what that would, what our recommendation would ultimately look like. Deputy Director Wiltinger, would you want to entertain a cap on that?
President Jolovich, Commissioner Roberts, I guess my recommendation would be for us to do a special meeting if we need to talk numbers rather than, or at the next meeting. Sean will probably work to try to figure out what that looks like after we get some bids, reports, work with some of the landowners there to see what we're looking at. We don't have a good number, so I'd hate to put a cap on it today, and then we could always, I guess, do a phone call if we needed to with all the commissioners in an open meeting to talk through that. But I don't know that we're at a point where a cap is probably appropriate. I think we just really need some direction with your approval to start looking at what this might cost.
So, Mr. President, Eric, what we're looking for is just for you guys to go develop an agreement to the best of your ability, correct? And then you'll bring it back to us with whatever that agreement, if it's possible.
Correct.
To work it out, whatever that agreement would be.
Correct.
You're just looking for a motion to allow you to begin that work.
If a motion is appropriate, I think just some direction to the department to go work towards getting a number.
Well, I would so move that we authorize the department to work toward an agreement to get that road repaired.
Second.
If there being no more discussion, I guess we'll vote on it. All those in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. What are we doing?
We're doing this.
President Jolovich, Director Bruce, members of the commission, we have one last order of business. I mentioned it yesterday to talk about subcommittee appointments. If you want to go through those real quick, and then we do have one for call of the public. It's over there and I'll get it to you. But subcommittee appointments, your budget subcommittee, legislative committee, and I've heard rumor of possible request for policy committee, and I don't know if we want to do that or if that should be just blended into the legislative committee, subcommittee. ADMB is another one, President Jolovich. So if you, however you want to handle that, we can start with the budget subcommittee. Right now you have Commissioner Roberts, Commissioner Bell, and Commissioner Masterson as subcommittee members. So if you would like, if there's interest trying to walk you through this one. So Commissioner Masterson.
Mr. President, it may sound odd, but I enjoy being on the budget committee because it gives me an understanding of how things work. But I've been on it for 2 years and there's only 3 spots. So I don't want to monopolize it, and there are other members of this group that may wish to be on that budget committee. So given that I've been on it for a couple of years, I would be willing to step down if one of our new commissioners or someone else would like to jump into the party.
Yeah, Mr. President, I was actually going to echo that same thing. I enjoy the budget committee. I think it's the best committee to be on. But been on it for a little bit and I could certainly step down. I think, and I'm also on the legislative committee, and it makes a little bit, I like helping out with that. I'm there for other reasons also. And so it maybe is beneficial to stay on that one for me. But I'm open to whatever anybody else wants to do.
How many seats are there on the ADMB board?
To Angie and I.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and if you want to stay, I don't want to step on your toes, but I'm happy to serve wherever I'm needed. If somebody else wanted to step down and
a recommendation
in that experience, I'm
that I would-
happy to fill in wherever.
Yeah, and just a recommendation, President Jolovich, that I would just throw out there is we've seen benefits to some of our newer commissioners in their term getting involved in the budget committee. That really helps them understand as the remaining years while they're on the commission, understanding what we're putting money towards and voting and et cetera. It's 3 on budget committee, subcommittee. So am I hearing Commissioner Commissioner Haskell, and Commissioner Roberts is staying on? Okay. President Jolovich, ADMB.
I'm with Commissioner Bell as far as the legislative committee. That's just, I do covet that one. I do enjoy it, and I am willing to step aside, but I got to tell you, I enjoy that one. But I'd be willing to step aside, and I defer to the wisdom of the group.
How many we want on legislative?
Or 3. Doesn't matter.
You go anyway.
So President Jolovich, 3 committees or 3 members on the legislative committee is appropriate.
Well, actually, not here.
Yeah, I would say that this is sort of a little more intense, like we meet every day during the session, but as you guys know, we all helped participate last year, especially during the interim session. So it doesn't forbid you.
Tony, you got that? We're gonna stick with Commissioner Masterson, Commissioner Bell, and Commissioner Lundvall. And next meeting, if Commissioner Lundvall would like to step off and give somebody else the opportunity, we'll change it out then. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes.
Mr. President, there is another appointment. There's another appointment of this body, and that's to the Wildlife Fund Board. There's an ex officio seat for a commissioner on the Wildlife Fund Board. I would be happy to continue to serve in that role, but also I have done it for 2 years. So it may be time to have new blood and someone else become involved with the Wildlife Fund and see the remarkable things that they do. So I'm not seeking to abandon it, but I also realize there's a whole bunch of people here and they need and would probably appreciate the exposure to it. So I would offer that up as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking Bonzi's dealing with that kind of stuff constantly, ranching, guiding. No, no, you didn't. I would be interested. All I'm saying is if you're interested and John's ready to retire.
I simply think it's appropriate to rotate people in and out of there. And it's a great group, Russ. Sorry.
Would you accept
Sean.
that? Okay, we have one public comment. Kenny, is it Jensen? Oh, there you are. You're hiding from me behind the podium.
Yeah, I was sitting clear in the back. I'm sorry.
Okay, welcome.
Well, thank you. My name is Kenny Jensen and I'm from the big village of Manville. So, and in the rush to get down here this morning, I forgot my notes and everything. So please bear with me if I see shiny objects or get sidetracked, but hopefully know that I do fill out my surveys every year. So maybe I can get extra credit at the end of what I have to say. So, the first thing I would like to talk to you guys about is how much I enjoy calling your Casper office. Them ladies, when they answer the phone, they are always super friendly, super helpful, and I really enjoy, I guess, bugging them when I have questions. I'll just straight up say, I think the Cheyenne office could learn a lot from them two ladies in Casper. I hate to say it, but I dread calling the Cheyenne office. I will call Casper with any questions, and I always feel I get treated with respect, get the help I need. So I would like to thank them ladies in Casper for being so nice and friendly to talk to. What I would like to talk to you about is your Springer pheasant hunting. And please don't think I'm upset with it because that Springer pheasant hunt is my absolute favorite hunt of the year. I have never once thought I was going to die packing a pheasant back to my pickup. So, and I've been hunting it for years and years, and I truly, truly enjoy it. It is my favorite hunt. But what I'd like to visit with you about is your standby hunting opportunities on them days you don't have a permit. I went down 2 different times this year and had to set in my pickup with my idiot dogs for over 5 hours on 2 different days. And on them days of standby, there were leftover permits. And if you're familiar with how that works, every year you put in for your permit, and at the same time you put out your any leftover big game licenses there are available to purchase. What I would like to suggest is on them days that have leftover Springer permits, if I do the research and see that tomorrow there's a leftover permit, why can't I print that permit out, go down, do that fast check, and avoid the 2 or 3 hour waits? You know, because if there's open spots, why can't you take the initiative to get that permit and go? I have brought this up for years and years, and every time I do, whether it's the Laramie office or the people in the check station, this last fall, it got to be a pretty heated conversation with the person doing the check station. And in the time of trying to get research and figure this meeting out, I was contacted by 2 different game and fish people asking me to not come to this meeting to present this, to go to a season setting meeting. So I've done that. I mean, where I live, our season setting meeting, nobody up there understands how that works because very few pheasant people up there in Lusk. But hopefully that makes sense. But there are, you present the leftover permits, so it looks like they're available, but they never are. So hopefully what I'm saying makes sense. Sometimes when I bring this up, it feels like I'm not speaking, to make it understandable. So I just think, like I said, if you're going to present that as an option, why can't we print it? It's the same way with your walk-in area or your hunter management area. So you can apply for that as soon as you're approved. You have to print that out. And in my little feeble idiot mind, it shouldn't be that much harder to print out a available permit for Springer on whatever day. So hopefully what I'm mumbling about kind of makes sense. So. And I wish I would have had my old phone because I had screenshots of all the different days. And, some days are sold out. Some days there's a lot of available permits. So I would just think if they're available, why can't we, print that out and avoid? Because then I had pictures that one day I was there, I bet there was 100 and some people standing out there. Sometimes it's pretty fun to stand around and listen to all the stories. And other days it's almost, some of them guys are bloodthirsty to get out there, and you never know.
So we can take that into consideration, look into it. Also, there's a public meeting in Lusk,
Yes.
March 30th, 6 o'clock
Yes,
at the fairgrounds.
yes, I knew that.
I would suggest that for one thing.
Well, and like I said, I do that every year. I've been bringing this up for years and years at that meeting. And when I talk to, I wish we had a game warden up there, but talk to the people that are there about that and ask questions, I always get, it's a licensing issue. And I understand that. And this year I just thought I'm going to skip all the middlemen and I'm going to make you poor guys sit through here and listen to my ramble on about it. And I mean, every year I present it in writing. I've already presented it in writing this year. And it's just something I'm passionate enough about that I felt it was worth the drive down here to half embarrass myself in front of you guys about this.
We could look into it and
Yes.
see if there's something that could be done or.
Well, and that's all I'm asking, sir, is just kind of to look into it and see. It may not work, and I've been told that you're thinking about changing the process. And if you do, you do. But like I said, this isn't anything new that, I've been bringing it up for years and years.
Well, I've never hunted in the special hunted, so I'm not real sure how all that works anyway, but.
And it's one of them deals, you've changed it years ago to where, what is it? At the end of May, you have to put in for your permit day by, let's just say the end of the May. So then if you draw, you have that. So you walk down to the check-in station, they scan you and you're hunting within minutes. On the days you don't have a permit, you show up. And there was one time this year, I showed up before 7 o'clock and I waited for 2 hours. There was another time I showed up at 9 o'clock because I was told by then they're out, and I was noon before I got to go hunting. And on both of them days, there were leftover permits. So and that's what cause you can go on the list and say area 3's got 100 and some leftover cow tags. I can run to the store and buy it or, mail it. In my mind, if there's a leftover Springer permit for whatever day, why can't I print that out? Especially if a guy's taken the initiative to check on that, print that out, go down and avoid them 2 or 3 hours. So. Okay.
Mr. President, thank you for coming. I don't ever want anybody to not think they can come talk to us. And so appreciate you driving down
Yes.
from Manville and tell your mayor I said hi.
Don't even get me started on that old fart. But and I say that and he's like my dad. So I think of the world of the old fart, but he is still an old fart. And you can tell him I said so.
Well, he's probably listening.
He might be. I hope he is. So
But anyway, thank you. I think we'll look into it. I think we have it pulled up here and I think that it does what you're talking about makes sense, but I think when we talk to the folks that run it, they would tell us this is why maybe we can tweak it. We can look at it.
And I've kind of been they've tried to explain it to me and maybe I'm just not understanding what they're suggesting, but and I don't know anything about the computers, I'll be honest, but in my mind, if all of a sudden somebody buys a license and it takes from that number, to me, it can't be that hard, but maybe I'm way wrong. And if I am, it's damn sure not going to be the first time I've been wrong. So I will admit that. So, but like I said, it's just something I thought maybe in person directly to you guys, it might maybe get, and if it don't, it don't. It's not going to stop me from going down there and hunting, but it's just sometimes when I had at the time my 2 boys trying to entertain them and a dog and me with no patience entertaining myself, so.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Move.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.